is Thursday, and I'm going to have to actually look at the date. What are we, August 9th? August 9th. This is the Architects and Engineers Grant Committee meeting, and I will go ahead and turn it over to our chair, Ms. Susan Ballard, for this committee.
Wanda, will you have roll call, please?
Susan Ballard.
Here.
Robert Campbell.
Present.
Brent Minchuk.
Here.
Brad Parker.
Here.
Brian Pitts is on
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for coming this morning. Roxanne's had her first initiation in issuing the letters for the grant applications, and we've gotten the majority of them back early this year, which we're very happy about, so we have plenty of time to read them. So we need to determine how we're going to cut $49,000 out of what's been allotted based on whether it meets the criteria or not. We've got 3 schools that have not responded. 2 of them have asked for extensions because they're closed in the summer. So there may not be a problem. And Tennessee State University has not turned in any requests for money in the last couple of years. So that might take care of $25,000 of it anyway. One of the things that I need to feel like we need to investigate a little bit is O'Moore has blended their program with Belmont. And so they are no longer a freestanding college. They're part of that university now. So we need to determine whether or not their accreditation has followed them, and I hope it has. But we need to make sure that we're not giving money to a program that's not been reviewed in that respect, or there's not some sort of letter to back it up. So I've got a question mark by that one. So I know you all have had the email. I don't know how many have had an opportunity to look at all the grant applications. But are there any other questions about things that have been submitted?
This is not a submitted question. It's my understanding was that there was a certain amount for engineering, a certain amount for architecture, right? I mean, there's a formula for that. What
Right.
what are those numbers?
So basically what they do is they base it on the percentage of students enrolled in each individual area, and then that part is given equally based on the student ratio. Then it's another formula that Mr. Philip Lynn determined that would cover the rest of it. So there is a minimum amount for any program of $3,500. So most of the programs in engineering and cover that very nicely. There's a few that they have a very small enrollment. I think Christian Brothers is one of them. So we don't have the spreadsheet that we've had in the past to look at in the same format. We have this sheet, and this is based on what was given in the past. So anyway.
So these are not the amounts from the totals. I just looked
No,
up
this
a
is the
couple of them.
average over the last 3 years that they received.
Okay.
So we need to go back to that spreadsheet and plug in the numbers and do the math that way. So
Yeah,
basically what we need to determine is there anybody that's placed an application for equipment or services or whatever that we're not going to accept. So, and then we'll get all the numbers on the sheet and look at it from that perspective.
Okay, so we're not making a determination on who to cut this morning.
Well, no, but we need to look at the applications and make sure that everything is in order, and then we can take their request. For instance, there is one program that didn't request their full amount, so that's their prerogative, particularly since we're over budget, and so we need to look at those on a case-by-case basis. So.
Okay, well, I'm maybe a little bit still confused.
Okay.
But is there an amount? So here's, if we're going to cut, and I want to go look at the engineering request, how much money does the engineering budget have for me to go say I need to go cut $10,000 out of the engineering request or something? What's my number?
Do you have a list like that, Roxanne?
I don't, based
Okay.
on architects versus our engineering programs.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
mean,
what
we've got a
what you're
certain
asking.
ratio that we distribute the money based on, or certain formula, and I'm sure it's with Philip Lim, it's Boolean algebra of some sort. But I just wanted to, make sure. I mean, if I just don't want to start randomly cutting stuff.
Correct.
If it
Yeah.
falls outside that budget number for that particular discipline. So that was my question.
So I've got last year's,
Okay.
and we can look at that. This one is when we had 300,000, so it's not quite the same, but basically, if we look at architecture distribution, the total at that time was $57,900. Landscape was 6,000. Yeah, this one is very old. In fact, this is after we changed it. So interior design is 3,500 per program. The engineering distribution is $229,800.
That was based on the 300,000 amount.
Well, and then we had the special grants of 20,000, so it ended up being $331,700, and the rest went in the general funds. So,
And your total grant is actually 350.
Right.
And so the Excel spreadsheet, I mean, we've got it. We've got what you all used last year. I just didn't know that you wanted it to, today we can start plugging in the numbers, but that spreadsheet probably is what we're going to fill out based on those that did turn in a proposal. Exactly as Ms. Ballard has said, we've got one at least that has turned in much lower than the other, and then the mathematical numbers are based on the students participating. So I don't know that you really need to be cutting an amount, because based on the number of students, these numbers kind of fall in line with what has gone out each of the years. And if you do the multiplication with the students, if you decide that their proposal is good, you're going to come close to that 350. Does that make sense?
we're just used to
Yeah.
seeing this,
Yep.
this amount, based on the enrollment with
Gotcha.
their applications. So,
In
that would,
October, then once we've got all the grants, then that'll all be plugged in to with the number of
So our purpose
individuals.
today is strictly to evaluate the validity of the applications
yes.
and no dollar, because I just heard cutting and I didn't know what I was cutting against.
Well, you all don't have this copy, so this
Well,
copy.
I've got that,
He
yeah.
does.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, the total's $399, so $49,000 has got to come off the top.
Oh, it was on my desk.
So, you got it, you got it. Okay. So,
That's the landscape architect you couldn't have.
We've got more copies.
You didn't have the trees.
Once again, it
So-
happens all the
So
time.
Robert and Blair, oh, you've got another one?
Well, you
Okay.
can share mine.
All right.
We're acting up over.
And Mr. Campbell, just for you to know, so those numbers are based on the letters that went out to them. The letters that have been sent every year have been with these numbers. So every year, the letters have gone out with an excess of the 350. So they've gone out with that number. I'm letting you see that number so that we're kind of clear on the amount, I guess, that at some point was started to be determined as the most they could ask for. That doesn't mean that that's what they're asking for, and that doesn't mean that when we do the mathematical equation by the number of students, that that's what they'll get. But that is the most that they could ask for in their proposal. And it's been left at that. So we can change it for next year. I mean, my thought in talking to John was, wouldn't I use last year's number kind of? And he said, we've left it consistent. And so it's been this $399. I don't know that you've then cut it. I think you've just done the math and decided what it should be.
So basically, the math, we never saw $399.
Correct.
We just saw the
Been there.
spreadsheet, and it was all done. So, we know that the $3,500 for the design programs is the minimum, so all those would be, as long as the equipment they're asking for is, acceptable. So,
How many interior design programs do we have?
6 that have applied, so let's see. UT Architecture and Design includes interior design in their number, so okay, that's Memphis, yeah, so there's 7. All right. So those are included in some of their numbers already, because they're, so, those, we know are okay. As far as engineering goes, if we want to look at what is in our iPads in terms of the amounts they're asking for and then cross-reference it with this. That might be a quick way to look at, what we've got. Let's see, Christian Brothers has asked for $25,688. Well, but then they know they're only going to get 20, so.
Like they asked for 20, right?
Prior page, they've asked for more, but this is what they're going to get is 20, based on what's available. And then Lipscomb appears they have 17,526, so there's a little savings there. I think moving forward, if we could say we want this amount here, we don't need 100 pages of explanations, Save them time, it saves us time. The engineers are very, very thorough when they submit their applications.
I don't think anyone submitted a 100-page application, but we've got a couple
yeah.
under 20 pages that
Yeah.
are right there, but.
So,
How much was Union?
Not requesting any funds for the purchase of equipment this year.
I remember reading that document.
35 from Tennessee Tech. Let's see. Page 55.
$29,109.70. Asking for 50, is that what you all see? Knoxville has increased their enrollment in interior design to 149 students. They used to take 20 a year, which was equal to share of the design money at one point. So UT Knoxville architecture and design is 54,640.
Thousand's what we just said for them, right? UTK.
Yeah,
UTC is 229,975.
yeah. Well, UTK Engineering's 50,000, yes, and UTC,
9,975. It's at the bottom of something.
oh, okay. Yeah,
Six.
I see it now.
Vanderbilt's 27,361.
Martin is not asking for as much as they're eligible for either, so. Total request. Appears they want 3 types of equipment.
$11,189.
11,189.
So sorry.
Have anything from MTSU or TSU?
MTSU is closed for the summer, and they're going to submit next week, is that
Yes.
correct?
Last year, you all did not get this paperwork until that first week in September, way after the holidays. So we're ahead of schedule, so you can actually have the grants in front of you with the requests. And I think have still plenty of time to worry about that bottom dollar, plug in those numbers, get all that. That's the only school that asked for the extension is MTSU. So we should have that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. That would be the one proposal that you're missing.
I mean, I was just hearing, so TSU has not asked for anything, is that what they said?
Not turned in paperwork in a couple of years. So, I know they'd had to change of staff several years ago, and we have called, we've sent letters, and we just hadn't had a response. And so, I'll have contacts there, want to reach out to them.
It's not too late if I was to ask.
And my plan was, since it's the only one I haven't heard back from, and I had this conversation with Susan earlier, is to reach out to them again and just say, this letter had a due date, but it's still not too late. The board's going to review it. And so, obviously, I think in October, you all again plan to meet and then finalize a lot of these pieces. So way before then, I'll get that to you if it comes in. And if not, then
I have one contact there in
Okay.
administration, I'll just reach out to him as
perfect.
well.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Is that the amount that
But they're eligible for,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thanks.
So, 27. Martin, has anybody come across that one? Did I miss comment?
11,189.
11,189,
And-
right?
And 40 cents.
And 40 cents.
University of Memphis is where I put that. Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts? I mean, it looks like to me we're going to probably be just fine since people are not asking those cases as they're eligible for.
That's $276,725.70, although I left the 40, so it's 726.10, I think. So,
Without the ones that have completed.
without the ones that
paperwork.
have completed, but then that's a question. How much is the engineering number? Is it 276, 725, 70?
Excuse me. Based on what we had last year is roughly $230,000. So,
So 40,000 to cut to get to their number?
well, if the group as a whole doesn't go there, I don't see any reason why we have to cut what engineering's at. Right. So I think in general, we're in very good shape. So, and the fact a lot of people are not asking for as much as they can, union being a prime example, voluntary basis versus what we might be forced to do. So questions? Okay. All right.
I can help.
So what we ask them to do every other year, we have the deans come and present what their 3D modeling cars that would flip over and do all kinds of fun tricks to, presentation boards and so on and so forth. So we've done this three times now, 2 times, 3 times, and so now it's kind of a competition between the schools who's going to have the coolest thing, which is good. Because in the past, we've never asked them to show us what they're spending their money on or how it's impacting the students. So it's a good opportunity for all of the deans to be together, and they've actually done some things collaboratively because they've had conversations, and they have one professor that could teach, multiple programs on a video, that helps save money within the program. So anyway, it's been a good thing, and so we want to keep supporting the opportunity to get the students involved with being registered and protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So, anyway, I would encourage everyone to, look through the grant applications and see if there's any concerns. Everything is an item that has to be tagged, or it is funds to take the FE exam. So, so far, I haven't seen anything that anyone's doing that they shouldn't be. So we need to confirm the status of Omar with their moving into Belmont and make sure that they are eligible to receive funds, and then get our last 3 applications turned in, and then you'll let us know.
Yes, as
Okay.
soon as they come in, I will. I have the Excel spreadsheet that I think you're used to seeing, so if you like, and this is the way we've had it, if you want the board office to fill in the dollars of what they've requested, and then you all go from there and fill in, the distribution. If at that point anything did need to be cut, at least you'd all have the spreadsheet, and you can have that way for
I
September.
think this is much easier for us to
Yep.
just have a nice overview, what they're eligible for, and then add another column, if you had space, of what they've asked for. Then we could tally what's been requested versus what's available. And I think we're fortunate this year that there's been multiple people that are not asking for as much as they're able to get. So, sense to me, but that's their choice. So we're not going to force it on them. So anyway, are there any other comments or thoughts?
Only comment was the applications looked to me to be pretty solid applications. I didn't see anything in. They were all legitimate requests for.
Most of the people that have been doing this have been doing this a while, and they understand, what works. We've had some phone calls and conversations, and, we've had to give them a little guidance. But outside of that, we've been, very fortunate. So, anyway.
I would agree with Robert that I didn't find anything in here that seemed questionable. I will say that I truly liked schools coming back to us and showing us what they've done and how they've made a difference, whether
Special grants team will be doing a presentation in October to show us, and we've asked them to bring the engineering students, the architecture students, and design students and discuss their project and how it impacted them as students and the community. So I don't know if we want to entertain doing that again. I know we haven't talked about it long enough to plan it, but I am having dinner with Dana to discuss what was good about it, what was bad about it, what can be better if we decide we want to do it in the future. So, anyway, so.
So our meeting date on, the October is the 3-day meeting. October the 4th is the Thursday. So I will be reaching out to all 17, depending what happens with TSU. But once we have everything, and letting them know that that's when they are to just confirm who's coming, how many individuals are coming to do the presentation for your full-day meeting. And I think we'll have that on the 6th floor, since the meeting is staying in this building. That's an open area. It's still recorded, and they can have room for their flip charts, whatever they want to bring, and have a little bit more information. So I will reach out to you if I've got any questions. Or
We're not going to be at a state park this year. We probably need to give them information on parking.
Oh, yeah.
And that
absolutely.
way, they are not running behind because
Right.
they might not be used to coming here, so.
Let me ask you, since again this is new to me, are they pretty much here all day? Is that most of Thursdays, their presentation, then all our board members take part in it, and we're all kind of together there?
So they attend the breakout sessions, and for instance, all the architecture design will come together in one room, and we talk about, what the issues are and where needs are and what's going on in education, what's going on in the industry, and how the educational process is responding to those. And so one of our hot topics this year will be interior architecture. And so how are we going to address this? And then landscape will have their group, engineering will have their group, and we're all meeting at the same time but in different parts of the building. And when we've been in state parks, we've had other separate rooms we could go to. So we need to make sure we can accommodate that. A separate space for them. So, well, we can talk about that for the plan.
And we've got we've got both rooms, 1A, 1B, and then the 6th floor has 3 different open areas. And generally then the meeting with them and their presentation is before lunch. How many hours?
It's going to take easily 2 hours to do their presentations. If we give them 5 minutes and there's 17 of them, we're going to be doing good to get it done in 2 hours. And we try to take a 15-minute break in halfway through, and then we have lunch, and then we go to the breakout sessions. So they're pretty much here the majority of the day. So, okay.
Susan, one logistic something, parking is potentially an issue, but guest passes within the building too is something we need to think about.
Right. Security will have to know that they're coming, and in the information, I'll make sure that they need a driver's license to get in. Other than that, it shouldn't be a problem. If anyone's coming under the age of 18 for the students and doesn't have a driver's license, one of us will have to sign for them, but they'll still have to go through all that.
Yeah. Special grants program only had seniors and graduate students, so I think we're okay there. But I can only speak on the interior design side, so we need to see. But we do need to let them know that, it may take a little while to get processed in and get up to the floor, so they need to be here, early. So, and there's always Nashville traffic. So, anyway.
Yes, it is Thursday instead of Monday, so that's the only plus.
All right. Unless there's any other comments, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank
you all.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning.
Yes, we're on the record. Today is Thursday, August the 9th, and this is the Architect Committee meeting, and I will turn it over to Mr. Rick Thompson.
Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we need a roll call or? Yeah. Can we get a roll call, please?
Rick Thompson? Rick Thompson,
Present.
Frank Wagster,
Here.
Brian Tibbs.
Here. Thank you.
You're all here.
We're here. This morning, I think it'll be a pretty quick meeting. We only have one particular piece of business, and this is an applicant who, in our rules, we require 3 references from architects. Mr. Thomas Sesniak, Thomas Sesniak, has been in practice for 39 years as an individual practicing architect. He has a letter that he submitted in a request that we waive the 3 architectural recommendations or evaluations. That for the reason being that the firms that he previously worked for, there are many, since he's been in business for 39 years, obviously, there are retired architects, some deceased, so he really doesn't have the access to architects for his submittal. He has submitted a variety of engineers, building officials, clients, other people associated with his practice over the years. We have the ability to waive that requirement as a board, given the circumstances. And that is this topic of discussion this morning, and I think everybody has found his application. If you need a little bit more time to review it, please do. If not, we'll open for questions.
But yeah, I was familiar with it. so.
Okay.
Thompson,
Yes.
I don't believe the rule allows for us to give an exemption to that requirement.
It doesn't.
So,
I'm sorry.
Rule 0120-01-.09, paragraph 2 says 3 such references must be registered architects or engineers with registration and experience in the applicant's fields of experience. Except, however, the applicants for registration as a landscape architect may use references who are registered engineers, architect. So he would have to have them from an architect if that's his field that he's applying for.
Okay. So we don't have the ability to waive any of those requirements, is what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misinterpreted that rule.
It doesn't have to be his former boss, though. It just has to be from 3 registered architects.
Okay. Well, the letter that he has submitted, and I don't want to read it into the record unless you want me to. On page 3 of 38 in the architects.
I agree. We don't have an exemption. Yeah.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess we, if we're not, authorized to waive it, I guess our hands are tied with that.
Liz, did you say it can be signed by an engineer?
No, it has to
Has to be
be
an
an architect if that's his desired field that he's applying for. There's an exception for landscape architects. It says they may use references who are registered engineers, architects, or landscape architects. But if you're an architect or an engineer, you have to have the architect or engineer, whichever field you're going into. Perhaps we could respond back to him and say that it doesn't necessarily have to be your former supervisor if none are still living. If he's a member of a professional organization, I'm sure he could get 3 colleagues to fill out his reference form, but there's not, currently in our rules, there's not an exception to that requirement.
Okay. So I misunderstood the rule. So apparently it doesn't appear we can help this gentleman.
I guess we could respond back to him with what you're saying, that our suggestions.
Yeah, I think we could respond back and give him some clarification and some suggestions. She worked in the field for that long. He could find 3 colleagues that could fill out his reference form. I think maybe he was confused and thought it had to be a former supervisor, a former boss. Of course, we do ask for some references from those people as a preference, but under the paragraph 2, as far as from the registered architects, we do require 3, and it does say must there instead of may.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of leeway under that requirement.
But I agree with Liz. It could be that he believes it has to be a supervisor and people that he's worked directly under or something like that. And being in the industry for so long, surely he can come up with 3 architects that then you have some leniency to, you have to do what, they are architects, but they're not direct partners or supervisors.
Right, okay.
Let me ask you this, Liz. Would it make sense for us to pursue changing or adding to that rule that the board would have discretion on special circumstances like
Yeah,
this?
if that's a change that the board would like to make, we can certainly look into drafting an amendment to that rule.
I'm sorry, is this the first time this has come up in, a long time or ever, to your knowledge, or?
Engineers have had this issue too. I can't remember how often the architects have had this issue.
I don't remember ever having this issue. I think we've had a couple of applications that didn't have the full 3, and they had to go back and get an additional 1 or something like that, but never that there weren't any.
I think the next step would be to reach out and see if he could find the colleagues. If that becomes a further problem, he could let us know, and perhaps we could take a look at a rule.
Do we have the ability to give advice where a lot of these references are glowing examples of how great they are? Because you know how this typically works. Unless you have someone that doesn't like you, then they're not very good. So I would think that we may get some clinical references. Know him; he's been in business. They don't know of any problem. As long as we're okay with what the references are, we can let him pursue that. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's what we have to do. Do we need a motion to that effect?
No, we'll just send a letter with more information on how he can meet the requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no
I'm
problem.
glad you cleared that up. So, is there any other business that we need to discuss this morning?
I did want to give an update on the architectural associate rule. I got that back from the Attorney General this week. They signed off on it.
Okay.
And it's being filed with the Secretary of State this week. So from there, it will be effective in 90 days, pending any opposition or pending any no votes at the Government Operations Committee. So pretty good progress with that rule. It's most likely going to be effective in about 90 days.
And if there are any objections, is it, excuse me, I mean, one objection, that wouldn't necessarily hold it up.
Not necessarily, but it would be addressed at the Government Operations Committee, and they would have the opportunity at the legislature to discuss the opposition or any comments that we received, and then weigh that in their vote to approve or not
so
approve.
it's just it's a commentary that goes along with that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We have no other business. I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, very good. I think as everybody starts to move into place, the notice of the August 8th night Board of Architects and Engineers Examiners meeting was posted on the Board of Architects and Engineers website on August 2nd, 2018. And we are in room 1A of the Davy Crockett Building, and this meeting will come to order. I would like to have a roll call, I believe, if I can find my agenda. I think that's the first thing.
Susan Ballard,
Here.
Robert Campbell,
Present.
Ricky Bursay,
Here.
Grant Manchew,
Here.
Blair Parker,
Here.
Brian Tibbs,
Here.
Rick Thompson,
Here.
Frank Wagster,
Here.
Kathy Ware, Alton Heathcote, Stephen King.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. All right, we got guests. I see 1, 2, and then, yeah, go ahead and say who you are, just to make sure that we've acknowledged you, please.
Casey Anderson, Executive Director of the,
Hey.
Tennessee Executive Professional Engineers of the American
Yeah.
Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee.
I'll write it down for you if you need to. Nathan, help her a little bit.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter.
All right, thank you all very much, and everybody else. We've got staff and our board attorneys and different people here, so I think we're in good shape. Any announcements? Roxanne, any announcements that we need to know of?
I don't think so.
I don't think so
we're
either.
good. We'll have them at
Okay. Everybody, the agenda. Anything on here that you see that we need to address? I do have one question. We've got a blue folder. What is it, and where does it fall?
The blue folder is an updated set of our laws and rules. Jared Steember was kind enough to put together an updated version for you. As you know, some of our rules have been amended over the past year,
Right.
and also our statute. So you should be looking at the most recent, up-to-date version in the blue packet.
All right, perfect. Thank you very, 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 very much. That's good to have. And we can take these home?
Yes. Just
Okay.
make sure to bring them at the next meeting.
Yes, great, thank you. All right, so are there any changes to our agenda? All right. Seeing none, the agenda will stand as printed then. Our June minutes. Give you just a second to refresh your memory or look over your notes to see if there's anything.
And they are on your iPad on page 3.
All right, any questions, comments? We could use a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of the June 14th meeting.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you all. Let's see. Ashley, since you didn't introduce yourself and you came in late, we're going to let you go first, just to make sure that, you know, it's all part of engineers embarrassing architects throughout our lives, so we're sorry.
Blaming this on back to school. My name is Ashley Cates. I am the Executive Vice President of AIA Tennessee. So we're doing our reports right now.
Yes,
then?
ma'am.
Okay. We just wrapped up our conference this past July, and we had a really great turnout. I think next year we're going to Knoxville. And part of the conference, we actually had someone from NCARB, excuse me, someone from NCARB come and present to the emerging professionals. So they're excited about that. And then I'm also going to talk to some of our emerging professionals on my board for any ideas or any discussion for the October retreat. So if you all have anything I need to discuss with them, please let me know, and I'll get that in the works.
Great.
So, thank you.
Any questions from any of the board members?
I'd just like to also note Roxana was also came to our convention, and she sat in on the NCARB meeting. So just want to thank you for coming, Roxana.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was wonderful. It really was very informative, and he did a great job.
Also note that she did know the organization. That she no, just terrible.
Brian was our conference chairman. So we worked closely together this year.
Well noted, Mr. Tibbs. Thank you. And that was not a reference to Heat of the Night, by the way. All right. Let's see. Don, since you're the next latest, or the least latest, go ahead and introduce yourself. And
Don Baltimore with Tennessee Interior Design Education and Advocacy. I apologize for being late, but every street around my garage was blocked, and we had to go around to an odd side and go up the down ramp. So that was fun this morning. But to report, the professional interior designers are supportive of the A&E board. The activities upcoming, which you'll hear more of in the October retreat, and Susan would tell you about CDIQ meeting here, and the interior designers are going to volunteer to help on that. And then the interior design community will be part of the design week in Nashville in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. All right. Casey, who is the executive director of something?
I almost gave you a whole bunch of options. Casey Anderson with the engineers. How about that? We are excited to say that our PE exam review course starts a week from Monday. It will go 10 full weeks every Monday, with the exception of Labor Day will be that Tuesday, but 2.5 hours Monday nights for the 10 weeks leading up to the week of the test. When they do the final wrap-up. That class is going to be offered live at Lipscomb, but it is also available remotely from anywhere in the country, or beyond, I suppose. And so we're hoping that we increase the number of folks doing that. Would love your help if somebody calls and says, do you know of a review course, of you sending them this way? I will say that the folks who write the book, the formal book that they all use to study from, their review course is thousands and thousands of dollars, and ours is in the $500 range. So it's entirely reasonable, and we've got really dedicated professors for each section. And so we do that class jointly with ASCE in the fall and the spring, so it's kicking off soon. September 16th through 18th is the Tennessee Engineers Conference. It is a joint conference of ACEC Tennessee, the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers, ASCE Tennessee section, and the Tennessee Structural Engineers Association. So those four together. Looks like we're going to have a really good lineup. We've got 7 different education tracks. We also have a full student track on the first day of that, which will be a good thing. We do a fundraiser during it for the Tennessee Engineers Foundation, which does a lot of scholarships and a lot of STEM work, and gives a lot of grants out just for STEM activities, and runs our Math Counts program and that kind of stuff. So there is going to be a panel discussion. So later in this meeting, if y'all could go on the record that there at some point during that conference, and I don't currently have the answer to when, but we would love to have a panel discussion that I was invited to sit on it, so this is not my panel to put together, but I was invited, and they mentioned that they were planning to invite 2 or 3 of y'all, so I think it probably should go on the record that that's okay, because I think they will expect you to speak on behalf of the board on some level. So that's the 16th through 18th. That's at the Franklin Marriott. Would love for you all to attend. Then October 26th, we are celebrating ACEC's 50th anniversary and our Engineering Excellence Awards with a gala at the Omni Nashville. Hoping to have about 500 plus people there. We've got 34, I think, entries into the EEA this year, and it's really great projects, really great celebration of engineering as a whole, and of where we've been and where we're going, and celebrating our former presidents and some of whom are in the room, and those kinds of things. So it's that will be an exciting night, and you all will receive an invitation to that as well. Does anyone have questions?
Question for Mr. Thompson, please.
I just have a comment. In regard to Mr. Campbell's verbal comments to both Ashley and you, I would like to tell you how much I've enjoyed working with you over the last several months, and hopefully we'll see you again in October, knowing that you'll know your position where you currently are.
I thought you were starting that to say that was almost a goodbye and thank you for your service. So I didn't know if maybe you knew something I wasn't told
the jury's out
yet.
here on you, from Campbell. So just want to tell you how much I've enjoyed working with
Well, I
you,
didn't
just
want to
in
confuse
case.
anyone because I was about to say Nashville Academy of Medicine, and I haven't worked there in about 5 years. So thank you. I always enjoy working with you as well.
Thank you. I'm good. Anybody else?
We could have another cup of coffee so I can keep
That's all right. That's all right. Thank you very much. Nathan?
Good morning. I'm Nathan Ridley again. I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. I missed your last meeting, and I apologize for that, but since last I was with you, we've had our annual meeting, our annual conference here in Nashville, and it was well attended. Our profession struggles with diversity issues, and that was the topic for the annual conference, and it was very well done. Probably had our best attendance. Even though it's expensive in Nashville, people do like to come here. And the event was well attended, and we had a nice venue out on Percy Priest Lake. Speaking of meetings, the national meeting is coming up in October in Philadelphia this year, and Blair, I suspect, is. Well, I have not attended one of those. They don't let the country lawyer go many times, but they have encouraged me, but they haven't agreed to pay for it yet. And then last but not least, we just had a pesky election a week ago today, and the results of that are, I think Mr. Lee, if he were here with us, Mr. Bill Lee from Williamson County, might admit that he's the dog that caught the car, and he's the Republican nominee for governor in Tennessee. His media was very, very good. His media was very, very good. And I think one of the teaching points for Political Science 101 is in a multi-candidate race, it's very difficult to go negative. Because if I'm running against all of y'all and I say one of you kicks your dog every night when you get home, the electorate doesn't know how to respond to that. What does that mean? Should I vote for that person over there who hasn't said anything? And that was the Lee technique, and it worked. He sort of rose above the fray. And to his credit, it was a well-done campaign. Carl Dean, the former public defender and mayor of Nashville, is the Democratic nominee. He won with about 80% of the vote against former House member, well, he's still a member of the House, Craig Fitzhugh. But kind of underlying all that, y'all know that would be the CEO for the state, but our state board of directors the legislature is facing a time of great flux. We're going to have 30 new House members. Their term will start November the 6th, and they won't get any smarter that day, but they'll be elected. And it's up to y'all to teach them what design professionals do. Because right now, I promise you, they don't know. Y'all know the issues that they run on. We're being sure that nobody invades us from Alabama or any other sanctuary cities pop up, and we want to be sure that our school children know that in God we trust. But sometimes you have to have that conversation one-on-one, either with the candidate or with their surrogates, to kind of coach them up on those policy positions. And Mayor Dean was a pretty good country mayor for Nashville, but he's not familiar with state government issues. And Mr. Lee's a really good HVAC company owner with many little trucks rolling through the neighborhoods of Nashville and Middle Tennessee, but he probably really hadn't thought about how to run the Department of Commerce and Insurance. So it's up to y'all to coach them on the issues that are important to them and the ways that we reach out to those. So anyway, I encourage your engagement. Bad public officials are elected by good citizens who do not vote. So I'll always preach that, to be sure that you and your employees and your family members go vote. So that's all. Happy to respond to your questions.
Thanks for Nathan.
Okay, thank y'all.
Nathan, thank you. And again, thank you for the part of the civics thing too. I mean, it's always interesting, and it does encourage us that we need to be involved in what's going on in our government. So thank you for that. All right. So now we are at legal.
Good morning, members of the board. We have a pretty short report, actually, this time around. Not too many complaints have come in, which is good, and as always, speaks positively on the professions as a whole, I would say. I'm going to ask Wanda, what page of the iPad does the legal report start on? I'm putting you under the
11.
camera. On 11, okay. Just let you know. Thanks. All right, our first complaint is 2018-019371. Frank helped me with this one, which I appreciate. To give you an overview on this complaint, This complaint was opened as a matter of course upon receipt of a notice from the State Fire Marshal's Office. So anytime the State Fire Marshal's Office is reviewing plans and they notice one of our registrants or licensees stamping multiple disciplines, they will just notify us and send us a copy of the plans. That does not always mean, and often doesn't mean, that there's a complaint or a consumer injury, but rather they're just being cautious due to the abnormality of that. This set of plans was stamped by an architect, but the architect stamped mechanical, electrical, and plumbing as well. The respondent did respond to state that this was a renovation job, and so all of the technical elements were not going to be redesigned, but rather replaced, and therefore he felt competent to produce the plans, and that he believed that he had enough knowledge and experience in the industry to produce those plans. I sent the plans over to Frank to take a look at from the perspective of an architect. As an architect, would Frank think that he would be capable, or an architect is capable, of stamping the plans as produced? I summarized a little bit of what Frank said. I won't speak for him totally. I'll let him talk a little bit about it. But I think the conclusion we had was that the plans, as far as the engineering plans were concerned, were quite cursory. They often just referred to do things per code, and ultimately left a lot of the decision making, if any, with the builder. So the respondent's response to that is that because these were a replacement, that's why that was that way. Frank's review indicated it might be more extensive of a renovation than the respondent let on. So Frank, if you'd like to speak a little bit to your review, I would love to get your input. But at the end of that, ultimately, I did recommend a letter of warning, just because we didn't have any consumer injuries in this case, and everything seemed to have been built and was successful.
Yeah, I guess to start, I would agree with your recommendation. However, in his letter, he indicated it was very small project, when in reality it was 3 12-unit apartment units, and then a couple others that were smaller. And these are all residential units. And the ceiling of the MPE drawings were a little concerning to me, but there was no design in them that it looked like he was, in other words, like take the electrical drawing. It was what I would call an architectural electrical drawing, in that he'd show where a switch was and a line over to whatever the switch was switching. And he didn't circuit anything. He didn't have any panel layout, none of that. And to me, what he produced is, he's capable of. However, my real concern was, and this goes over into the plumbing and mechanical, pretty much the same thing, but was that he's sealing these drawings, and in reality, somebody else is going to have to do the design, the circuiting and so forth. Now, part of what he was saying was that they're basically taking these older units, gutting them, and redoing all this. But there were several of them that were being upgraded to be accessible. And, as far as the architectural part of that was fine. But you're moving walls, you're moving plumbing, etc. And so, he's showing where the plumbing fixtures go, but he's not showing any sizing or anything like that. So it's kind of this, borderline thing to me is he's not designing something over his head, but he's not really designing it, and he's sealing these drawings. And so I think, and again, apparently he's been doing this and been successful at it, and his credit, I guess. But I think at this point, we should send him a warning saying, you're not supposed to be doing this, and to advise him that in the future he needs to have professionals doing the MP&E drawings. But he isn't really designing anything that I saw.
I would like to see, if we're going to send a warning to point him towards the language that's on our website that has some specifics in it that talk about when you need, in renovation work, when do you need something sealed by an engineer, and there's some specifics on there like adding over 3 fixture units of plumbing, which isn't much, adding 5 tons of air conditioning. If it's simply a replacement 1-for-1, it might be fine, but if he gets into adding or maybe moving more than 3 fixture units, I think he ought to be pointed to the language that we have on our website and in our laws that tell him when he needs to have an engineer.
Happy to do that. I'll copy the language and include a hyperlink in the letter.
Susan?
Do we need to ask him to take the laws and rules?
Wouldn't hurt.
Always welcome
Yeah.
to do that.
Can't claim ignorance after he's done.
In Philip's honor. So.
That's right.
Rick?
I have a question in regard to what you said, Ricky. If I'm replacing a lav or a toilet or a shower or whatever, and I need to adjust the location because I'm working with ADA requirements, I mean, technically, is that moving the toilet and requires me to get a plumbing engineer involved?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the layout, and there can be times when you move it and it produces quite a bit of change in terms of what the plumbing and the venting have to do. And so it's not as simple as it appears, those ADA upgrades. There's been plenty of those that we've certainly gotten into more than we thought we were going to get into.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about moving across the room. I'm talking about moving it a foot over and things like that, because all of a sudden you've got a trap you've got to move. That's not, come on, that's reasonable.
Usually
design.
a foot wouldn't get into that, but
But then where does it stop when someone files a complaint against you, and all of a sudden it's on your record and all that kind of stuff? I mean, that's a little bit ambiguous, and I think it's not fair to the profession if we've got just small things that we do. I mean, obviously what Frank's referring to is different, but with your comment going to the website, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, I'm working on a bathroom and I've got to move this stuff, and now I've got to go get an engineer involved. All I'm doing is moving some things around, moving a light switch. It's still on the same circuit. I'm not doing anything like that. So where is that fine line?
yeah, I think moving a light switch is usually almost always a simple item. Moving plumbing fixtures more often than not gets more complicated because you've got gravity drainage and lengths and slope and that sort of thing, where you can't go up and around something. So and I can't say that they're not all, that there aren't some out there that are just simply moving a foot, but I'm just saying we do a lot. We're not the only engineers that do ADA renovations, and most of them get more involved than a note and an arrow.
Yeah, as an example, it's like you're talking about plumbing. They've moved stuff around. The drawings show no vents, but there is a note somewhere that said vent as required. Well, who's going to tell you where that is and what size is, and is it hooked to the trap, or where is it?
Code requirements on where the vent needs to connect.
And the electrical, he implied that there wasn't much to that he was going back like it was, but they pulled all the wire out. They pulled all the switches out. They added fans and things, and these are all shown generally, not.
So was the size of the wiring covered with ground wire? Was that all covered by due per code? It sounds like it was
designed per the 2008 NECC,
which is not up to snuff.
Any more, Susan?
How many units were involved in this apartment complex?
40-something, I think. Three 12 unit. His explanation that was small is he wanted to say that there was one unit done several times. But
Right.
Was this contract for one unit, or was it for all 40?
oh, it was
Okay.
for the entire complex.
Right,
I mean,
so-
the other thing, and we didn't even touch on civil, but you know, he had a site plan, and there were a lot of upgrades for accessibility as far as sidewalks goes. But there was no topo. There was no. It was just a plan, and it would show sections of a sidewalk, say, replaced to meet ADA.
48 total rental units. And then non-dwelling units, he did an office, laundry, community room, and a maintenance room. For a total of 32,000 square feet for all buildings, for total building area. Slowly.
Anything else? I'll make one quick comment on this. I mean, it does seem like, I understand the letter of warning, but it does seem like, unfortunately, in both of our professions, there's a race to the bottom where we're not putting the amount of time and effort and details into plans, and we're leaving a lot of things up to contractors' license to cover what we should be doing as professionals. And this may or may not be one of those cases. I think this is one of those cases, and it's one of those cases that's that I think we all as professionals need to educate our young engineers and constituents on, because you know, there's a, for an extra $4,000 or $5,000, he could have had another set of stamp plans from other professionals that would have had the details in there that they needed. But I'm sure it was, hey, you're the cheapest guy, or something along those lines. And I'm seeing this way too often where that bubble's put on there that says to be done by contractor or to be, and that's not what we signed up for. So,
And I did search the drawings pretty closely, hoping I would find a note that said actual design needs to be, the contractor needs to, you know, get the services of a registered professional. But then I couldn't find that anywhere. Now, there probably were some specifications associated with it that I didn't have, but there wasn't anything on any of the materials I saw.
anything else? Got a motion?
Motion to approve, I guess is the best way to say it, but with the recommendation that the letter and the reference back to the website, as well as the laws and rules. Yeah.
All right. And pass it. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. More discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Let's go to number 2.
2018-033171. This was an internally open complaint alleging the respondent advertised itself as an architect without holding registration in the state. However, there wasn't any attached examples of that advertisement. A search of their website did not indicate any advertising in Tennessee. I spoke with the legal counsel for the respondent, and they said that they had had that issue in the past and have worked to correct it. They indicated that perhaps this was opened by a board member who saw a yard sign or something like that that I don't have access to, but that they would internally do a review to make sure they didn't have that anywhere. So for whatever concern that may have sparked this, I don't have that information. I did at least speak with them to ensure that they knew that something had happened clearly that indicated something was going on. So I ultimately have to close it because I don't have evidence in the file, but I did want to let you know I spoke with their lawyer to make sure they understood, just in case that was came from a member.
Right. Do we need to have a motion to
just have a question.
Question then.
Sarah, we had this conversation yesterday relative to complaints that complainants may want to file anonymously. So I'm just curious with regard to the fact that you reference this as internally. So can you just walk us through that? Because we had this extended conversation yesterday. I mean, an hour and a half. So please expand.
Sure. I would be happy to. So I would actually discourage this. Whatever, if this was from a board member, I would highly encourage you all to file a complaint in your name. And in fact, our internal processes may start to tell you that you'll have to. This is probably a case where someone contacted Francis or someone in board staff and they went ahead and opened it for a member of the board, perhaps. I have advised staff that that is not how we operate because ultimately I don't have evidence usually when that happens. And so obviously if you all see something in the community, that's a concern to me. You all know the rules, you all know the laws, but then I don't have access to any of that. And it also looks like we're giving preferential treatment to board members. So typically, if you want to be anonymous, when we have an internal complaint process that's centralized now, there is a mechanism to indicate to them that you want to be anonymous. It is not a perfect system. Everything that's done in the state is an open record. So people have filed complaints where they'll go through and write their name is anonymous, their email is anonymous at Gmail. So typically, though, they're going to want an active email address from you. We have done it where people they will file with their information. I can see it, my investigators can see it, but they requested to be anonymous, and we redact that complaint and send it to the respondent. However, if that respondent says, I want a copy of that record that has the name of the complainant, I have to produce it. There's not a protection for that under any sort of privilege. And so it is difficult, to be honest, to file a complaint with us that is ultimately truly anonymous. And that goes for board members as well, as they start to try to prohibit staff from opening complaints on the behest of someone over email. So it's not easy. And I know that can be challenging. I've gotten calls from respondents, or not from respondents, but potential complainants who are concerned, obviously, about their employment, concerned about business relationships, and ultimately, I've advised them different ways. Sometimes it's a university and it's a specific professor has a complaint. Sometimes I'll say have it be on behalf of the university, because they also have, in our statutes and rules, an obligation to report. And so they kind of find themselves in a rock and a hard place, which I sympathize with. Lawyers have the same burden. We are obligated to report with knowing that might mean our job is on the line if we retaliated against. And ultimately, the thing I have to tell them, even though it's a sad thing to tell them, is I don't really have authority to protect you from that, but you can hire an employment attorney or someone to help you through the retaliation process if you believe that's what's happening, especially since you have a professional duty as a licensee to abide by the board. But what I've learned with lawyers is sometimes the risk of being ethical is the risk of your employment. It's a sad situation, but we're very thankful for that. We try to do what we can. If a complainant tells me they don't want to be involved, I usually let them off. Sometimes that jeopardizes the case. If it's a bad case, sometimes I tell them, sorry, you're out of luck, if it's something where I think consumers are injured. But if it's a title issue or things like that, if they are really adamant about not being involved, I do my best internally to wall them off as much as I can. But it's difficult to remain truly anonymous, just to kind of go back to the heart of that. So.
Okay. And this, I'm going to follow up just real quick to that. And maybe this is something that we talked about a possible solution yesterday to some of this with the professional societies. Maybe that needs to be something that we talk about, just not in this meeting, but about that. So I don't know if that's at the retreat that we can talk for a few minutes or just after the meeting about what's going on. Okay.
We know, Robert, I'm sorry, but that does bring to bear a thought relative to the complaints that someone might feel should be made, but they're so scared about retribution that they don't want to do it except anonymously, are probably the ones that are most important to follow up on. So I would suggest that we really need to have at least some education. Casey, maybe there's something we can put on the agenda that provides to the membership and at all these conferences that I suppose they can submit something. There is still a post office, right? So they can mail something.
They will still open that complaint. You know,
Yeah.
So if you want to send in something in a letter that's anonymous, we will still investigate that complaint. That's probably the easiest way. The other
It
way
is-
would be to call and ask what the process is without identifying yourself first, so
Right.
that they can help you fill out the online form
Right.
in the best, most appropriate way.
And I know we don't want to have a glut of anonymous complaints.
No.
I mean, that's just stupid. But
The honest truth is, most of the time they're competitors.
Right.
That's
Right.
when they're anonymous. I assume you're competing with somebody typically.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. So number 2, do we need a vote on that? Do we need a motion from the board to close?
Motion to
So
close
moved.
as recommended.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And item 2 is closed.
Number 3, 2018-04531. This licensee, a licensee filed this complaint after seeing the respondent list their title as a construction engineer on a handyman page. I think it's Angie's List, something like that. The respondent stated that he didn't understand that he couldn't do that he was a engineer in the military and now is doing his handyman business. Kind of created this title as a branding mechanism, but said that he would do his best to pull it down. I tried to reach out to him to see if he had done that. I didn't receive a response back. And when I went online, it looked like he had a couple of places where it still was appearing, but it was in those databases of where they kind of collect business information. So I'm not even sure his autonomy over those pages. But I did recommend closing on a letter of instruction explaining the use of engineer. I think with the combination with construction, it's just it would look like you're an engineer, especially since he's telling people I was a military engineer. So.
I thought you were queuing up there.
Getting it close.
Okay. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is he under the jurisdiction of our board?
Or unlicensed activity, but not, so that would be the extent of it, yeah. Unlicensed title use.
Other questions? All right, do we have a motion for this?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
What are you going to so move?
I'm going to take the recommendation of our legal staff to close upon issuance of a letter of instruction.
I've got my second for that
Yes.
motion. Okay.
Yes. Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Yeah, let's have it. Okay.
Right.
Item 4 represents.
This is a represent I'm doing on behalf of Shalina Brown, who is out of town right now. 2018-033-171. This complaint had come before us before, and we didn't actually make a decision on it. It was deferred. This is a case where a complainant bought residential blueprints, basically, from one of those large database websites where you can scroll through all the houses. I love those. I like to go on there. So he purchased the plans, hired a Tennessee builder to start executing the design of the home. The builder wanted to get, the plans were older, wanted to get perhaps an update from the original producers, go through code, make sure there was any adjustments, and it ultimately broke down into a fee dispute. What was included in when I paid for the plans? What do I have to pay now? But the complaint was opened on the basis of the firm uses the term architectural in their name, but they are not registered architects. However, they're not here. They are in Missouri. And so because of that, I have mitigating factors that this was a general website not aimed at Tennessee consumers that were purchased without any intent to offer any additional services or building or design services. The website even contains a disclaimer pursuant to Missouri law that explains that they are not registered. The Missouri Attorney General opined on this opinion to say that they were not in violation of Missouri law, so where they are housed, they are not breaking any laws. And this is ultimately a fee dispute anyway. Originally, we were discussing it because we were trying to determine whether, if a firm is in another state, but a Tennessee consumer reaches out to them for any sort of service, when does our Title Act apply? And so we kind of got in the weeds and weren't quite sure and decided to defer. I'm bringing it back. We don't really have any new information. This is pretty much what it was, but I'm recommending closure. I understand that we have a Tennessee consumer that engaged with the business that doesn't comply with Tennessee law. However, with the internet and the accessibility of these firms across all 50 states, I think it would be an overreach for this board to regulate the names of firms in every other state just because a Tennessee consumer might come across them in a large database. Obviously, if they were engaged in the construction process here, we would be talking about something different. But because that's not what we are doing here, I recommended closure.
Board members, anybody?
Just one,
Mr. Brown?
you did say, too, that once you researched it, they actually did not make any claim that they had a registered architect or anything.
Right, and they expressly say otherwise. We have no registered architects on staff.
Okay. I make a motion to close.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Which one do you all want to ask?
Second.
So, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the ayes have it. Item number 5, please.
Item number 5, this is 2017-01-8981. This is the one Stephen reminded us of, the land surveyor that we had previously sent back to the Land Surveyors Board for their determination, and now it's back with us. To summarize what happened, the complainant is a city official and a registered engineer in Tennessee, and complained to say that the a land surveyor had stamped multiple drawings in a set, well, all the drawings in a set, which included not just things you would expect from a land surveyor, but stormwater, drainage systems, and other types of plans. There was a registered engineer as well that had stamped some of the calculation sheet on the first set. Ultimately, they responded to the response to say that the site plan for stormwater management was that he was qualified to do that. They didn't think he needed an engineer certificate, but that some of the other places they stamped was just them rushing, that it should have been the engineer that sealed. There were some pages where both registrants stamped, but there was no indication on that page who was responsible for what portion of that design. We ultimately sent this back to the land surveyors. The land surveyors issued a letter of instruction to the land surveyor to explain the limitations of the surveying seal, indicating that they have the same rule as we do as far as if you're going to have multiple registrants, you need to designate what portion of that design was your work, and also indicating that they need to remain in their area of competence as a land surveyor. I did my own research, and it's part of our policies, but the Attorney General has issued an opinion for us years back that specifically says that land surveyors are not deemed competent under the definition of what a land surveyor is to conduct stormwater drain seal. So even if he felt that he was able to, we have an Attorney General opinion that says that's beyond the scope of what you're supposed to do, and that falls as a registered engineer's role only. So with that back, I think we sent it there mainly to see, just because we want to be sure that, well, one, they saw it, and two, to make sure that we didn't have anything that conflicted with possible policy that they have of the scope of what they can utilize their seal for. So now that we have the answer, which is really, they pretty much came down, I think, how we discussed we thought they would. My new recommendation is that we reopen the complaint against the respondent land surveyor and match the Land Surveyors Board by issuing a letter of warning regarding unlicensed practice of engineering. And additionally, I recommend we open a complaint against the engineer as well, and close that upon a letter of warning regarding multi-registrant sheet descriptions. So it seemed to be the engineer sealed everything properly that they were supposed to seal, with the exception of not designating on those multi-stamped sheets what portion he was responsible for. So the good news is they did reissue these plans with everything sealed how it was supposed to be, and everything moved forward on this project with the engineer sealing the appropriate design. But I still believe that the lack of any description of who is responsible for what when we had multiple seals is problematic.
Discussion? Steve, go ahead.
Let me make a few points. One issue that the consultant did submit these drawings the first time to the city with only the surveyor stamp on all the sheets. And then the city engineer questioned it, and then the second submittal, there was the duplicate stamps on several sheets that seemed appropriate, although there wasn't a description of what work each registrant was responsible for. And there was the surveyor stamped a sheet that had some very minor structural details. I think there was maybe some a gravity wall that was pretty small, wasn't very significant, but it's not land surveying either. So I guess one of my concerns, and the reason I originally suggested that we look into the engineer, was I don't know how the engineer let those drawings get out of his office stamped like that and submitted. So that's a concern I have. So I think it is appropriate to consider that complaint. and I was sent the recent information, and one thing I noticed in that I'm a little perplexed by, the Surveyors Board hired another surveyor to investigate this complaint, and his recommendation was a penalty. So that's just information that's in the file.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Steve, is it possible that the surveyor did all the sheets and stamped all the sheets, and then the engineer came back and basically plan stamped the sheets that needed an engineer stamp? I mean, or was it evident that the engineer produced that work originally?
I'm not real sure whether and you may know, but I don't know whether the surveyor is an employee of this firm or not, or if the surveyor has his own business and merely works with this engineer. I don't know that. I tried to find out, and this company doesn't have a website. I was hoping I might be able to, determine from that point, but I don't know.
Questions? Yes, sir. Frank?
Drawing sheets have a border?
Order?
Yeah, showing the company and so
Yes. It has the company name on. I just don't know whether the surveyor was an employee or a subconsultant to the engineer.
I think you could find that out, but with a little research. But
I feel uncomfortable with the board coming to a conclusion of just a letter of warning without knowing whether plan stamping occurred.
So I think what I'm hearing is we might want to try just to see if we can get just a little bit more information for this to make sure that, if it was a sub relationship, or just get them on the phone and just try to figure out what their business relationship was, and if they're in the same office, and the explanation, we were trying to get something submitted on a Friday afternoon, and that not right, but I mean it makes a little bit more sense than some of the other stuff. Sometimes you get a little bit too familiar when you're in the same office. So by knowing who did what, but anyway. Let's, if that's okay with everybody, let's defer this to get a little bit more information.
If I may recommend, would we like to, if you would, since there's a new complaint being opened, obviously that's going to be focused on the engineer. So in that context, we could modify my recommendation for the second portion to say additionally open a complaint against registered engineer for further investigation. So we could close out the land surveyor at this point and shift our focus to the engineer, who's ultimately, especially depending on whatever business relationship we find, might also have a responsibility as far as charge, and look into plan stamping as well. So we can come back with the engineer portion, settle out the land surveyor portion, and look at that in might be October, might be the next meeting.
What you're saying is go ahead and issue a complaint, a letter against the land surveyor now, and then open a new complaint against the engineer.
That would be what I would recommend, obviously deferring to you all.
Right.
I'm still concerned, and I think kind of like Steve was saying, that the surveyor stamped all these drawings and it went to a plans review, and what if the plans reviewer didn't reject it? Then they would have kept going, be my guess. And I get the feeling that was the intent. Now, again, I wasn't there, I don't know, but it sure appears that way.
This jurisdiction requires that the cover letter be sealed by an engineer for this type of plan work, so it was pretty much rejected immediately. And they did indicate they understood that requirement, which is part of the basis of the argument that it was a mistake. but also kind of plays to the sloppiness, which is you knew these plans were never going to go through with your seal on the cover. It had to be the engineer, so why did you seal the cover sheet? So that's going to what you said exactly. So if it was in a good, they didn't do a good job of it, but you're right that clearly they're trying to get them through.
At that point, I think you stated that, that the actual surveyor board did enter a penalty. So it sounds like no.
No, they didn't. They hired a consultant to review the case, and that consultant, who is a surveyor, recommended to the board that a penalty be issued. But the board issued a
Letter of instruction.
letter of instruction.
If I could just add one piece, that program actually has reviewers through the bidding process and that are part of reviewing all cases. So it isn't one special person in a rare case hired. It's what that program does for their complaints. The reviewer would have seen it and made a recommendation.
The honest truth, and this is just from the legal side, is we actually ask them often not to make those sorts of recommendations because that's really in the jurisdiction of the board, and they don't really. We want to know their opinion on the work product, and so a lot of the times when they see that, I actually send them an email afterwards, being like, "Thank you, your report's amazing. Please stop recommending discipline," because they just don't have the insight you all do as far as the discipline structure and things like that. That's not what we hire them for. But I agree, the board did ultimately decide not to go with that recommendation, but I also didn't see the entry. The attorney may not have thought it was appropriate to even bring that up to the board, since that's not what we want to use our experts for. And if they end up on the stand later, we just don't really want them involved in the settlement negotiation, which is functionally what this is. So
I have one question about the land surveyors. Do they have their consultants that are outside the state of Tennessee, so they don't have knowledge of the individuals in the...
No, the individuals that are on their review or witnesses, the contracts issued to reviewers is what we call them, are Tennessee licensed land surveyors that are taking on that contract.
Do they present their case as a number like we do?
Exactly the same as we do,
Okay,
and
but
their
then when they're
report goes to
stamping,
the attorney.
They're seeing the title block and
Correct.
the person's name, so there's no, okay.
it's functionally the same as when I send something to you all. They just use somebody else.
Right.
I would think, back to the title block deal, when you you renew your registration, you normally list what company you're working for. And so it'd be easy enough to check their registration and see if they're both working for the same company or not.
Susan? Oh. Okay. I still think we're probably back to where I don't think we should close the surveyor complaint yet, because it seems like there may be some more information we need to kind of flesh out with regard to penalty, and then open the new complaint against the engineer. I think that's certainly a legitimate thing to do. So do we need to do that as a motion, or do we,
The motion just to reopen the complaint against the respondent and to open a complaint against the identified registered engineer. That would do it. And then we'll take it through our normal investigation process and I'll even send out an investigator to get some questions specifically answered, maybe by sworn statement if possible.
okay, and then I want to add one quick thing, so I can't technically make that motion.
I'll make a motion that we reopen the case against a respondent and open a case against the engineer complaint.
I'll second that motion.
Second, okay. Any more discussion? So my discussion on this is, Steve, have you had a informal conference or anything with any of these parties?
No, and I think originally, out of respect for the Surveyors Board, we wanted to give them an opportunity. But that is something I think we discussed and decided not to until we heard back from the Surveyors Board.
I think during this process of gathering information, I think it would be helpful to have an informal conference so that we are able to get our side of it hashed out. All right? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Okay.
Kind of a late fact, but it does appear they work for the same company. In fact, they have their subtitles engineering and surveying, so they are one entity together, it appears.
That'll be some good information on the next one then.
That does it for the legal report. Thank you all very much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
All right.
At the end of that legal report on page 16, you've got the Fresh Start Act that was passed. If you have any questions, it's there for you. I think it was emailed back during the legislative session, but Liz can give you any feedback.
And I'll just give you a brief overview. This shouldn't affect the board too much. I've been utilizing this new act with the Motor Vehicle Commission. We do see a lot of applicants with felonies on their records with that board. Your board doesn't see too many of those. Sometimes we will see a licensee end up getting a felony. So this act applies to licensure and discipline. So when we see a felony on someone's record, whether it's somebody applying for a license or a licensee who has received some criminal discipline, we will evaluate it under the Fresh Start Act criteria, and you board members will need to go through each of the justification steps and talk about the weight of each before you make a decision as to whether the license is approved or denied, or a decision as to discipline. And I'll just read a few of the factors just so you can get an initial idea of what you would be looking at. You would look at, the first one is the nature and seriousness of the crime for which the individual was convicted. The second one is the length of time since the commission of the crime. The third is the relationship between the nature of the crime and the purposes of regulating the occupation, profession, business, or trade for which the license, certificate, or registration is sought. The fourth is the relationship between the crime and the ability, capacity, and fitness required to perform the duties and discharge the responsibilities of the occupation, profession, business, or trade. Fifth is any evidence of rehabilitation or treatment undertaken by the individual that might mitigate against the relationship of crime to the occupation, profession, business, or trade. And the sixth justification would be any applicable federal laws regarding an individual's participation in the occupation, profession, business, or trade. Now, there are a few exceptions to the Fresh Start Act that include those on the sex offender registry and those on the animal abuse registry, as well as a few others. Like I said, you probably won't have to deal with this often, but if we do come across a felony applicant or discipline, we would have you discuss each one of these factors on the record before determining a decision. And there's also a notice requirement that we give the applicant or licensee notice as to what our decision will be and give them time to make a response. They can come before the board to discuss, and they can also appeal the decision to Chancery Court here. Have any questions? Of course, we'll go over it more thoroughly when a specific instance arises for this board.
I do have a couple questions if nobody else does. I assume that when we get one of these applications, it seems like there are 3 or 4 questions on here that are going to be very difficult for us as reviewers to ascertain. Is the form, if somebody fills in that they have a felony, will the form then ask them to say, do you have any evidence of rehabilitation or treatment? Because that's not a line on the form to fill out. No, that's one. Number
Okay.
2, I have no idea if any applicable federal laws I just don't. I can make a guess on the relationship between the crime, but there's 2 or 3 in here that really seem like that we need to have another form for them to fill out if they check yes for a felony to answer these questions themselves. Because
I can explain how the process has worked with our Motor V Commission. This board can definitely create a form to answer some of these questions as well. With the Motor V Commission, the applicants will send in their application, and if they've checked that they have a felony on their application, they are also asked to send in documents of their conviction that show what the charge was, what their penalty was, how long their probation lasts, etc. And then from there, I write a memo to their director that includes my analysis of these 6 justifications, and the director will then take my overall recommendation from those and weigh the decision And at that point, when she has appeals, those appeals come before the full commission, and then they discuss the 6 justifications that I've written out and whether or not they agree with them. So I would be providing you guidance, and then the board would debate whether you agree with each step of that guidance and vote to approve or disapprove what legal has recommended. So, for example, if we get a felony applicant, we receive their information of what their charge was, whether or not they have had rehabilitation, how long it's been. I would fill out a memo. I would send it to Roxana. Let's say the application, we feel that it would likely be a denial. That applicant could come before you all and have a chance to answer some of your questions, and then you as a board could go through each step and look at the answers that I've supplied for the justification under each step and discuss whether or not you agree with each and every one. And then you can decide to uphold the denial, or you can say, you know what, this person has demonstrated that it's been a long time, they've done enough rehabilitation, we're gonna grant them the license. So it is a little bit more of an involved process, but you will have guidance from legal, and before the first one comes before you, we will make sure you have detailed instructions as to how to handle it. But I do agree we'll need to have either an additional form with the application if they do check that they've had a felony, or we can amend our current form to add the questionnaires on there.
If I could add, so we are asking that question, and exactly as Liz said, that's for every program. If you checked yes, we need all the documents you can provide about that. So this act, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, is actually making it less possible for us to deny them, not more. So because we're looking at so many criteria, you all haven't, I don't believe, since I've looked at, had anyone with a felony that you would have denied. This actually means you probably even will have less of a chance to deny because of all those other factors.
So just as an example, obviously it's all fact dependent, so I can't say with certainty, but just to give you an example, if somebody had a simple drug charge and I were writing my memo, I would look at these factors and I would probably say that doesn't directly relate to the criteria of practicing as an architect or an engineer. So a lot of those charges, you're probably going to see those licenses get approved. Whereas if the applicant came in with some type of fraud or trying to think of one that would directly relate, so it has to be very specific, and we have to justify it very specifically. So like Roxana said, you probably will see more approvals with this act. It is intended to give people another chance, a fresh start at having a job in Tennessee. But this board doesn't really see a lot of felony applicants.
And you did say there was for sexual predators and animals?
There's a few exceptions
So
that
if
the Fresh
they've-
Start analysis does not apply to. So if someone is on the sex offender registry, they can still be denied regardless of whether or not their crime directly relates to the profession.
And animal abuse.
That is one of them, and then I think there's a few others. I don't have the list with me right now.
Okay, odd equivalents, but okay.
It says Class A, B, and C felonies. So what's an example of that?
That would be exempted, like a possession charge, drug possession.
Not exempted, it says these are the presumed rebuttable.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it does
On
have
page
that.
18.
Okay, I'm sorry. The exceptions are listed on this sheet. Our deputy chief counsel created this for you guys. So those would be, I'm sorry. I would have to take a look at that. I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that question at this time.
This may be something to add to our October retreat, just to kind of ask a few more questions about it. Kathy, does that sound about right? Because, I mean, I think there's some...
I don't know what a Class A, B, or C felony is. Thank goodness.
Rick, can you enlighten us on some of those, please?
Well, the classes are given to certain crimes. They carry different weights. So, for example, I can't specifically list them for you right now, but say someone had a charge for selling drugs, you might get assigned a D felony, but say they sold those same drugs in a school zone. It might be a higher class felony because of stipulating factors. So it really just all depends, and every single one of these cases are fact dependent. Every single one of my memos that I've done for the Motor Vehicle Commission are different because of the date the crime was committed, the rehabilitation some people have done, the time that they've spent in probation, things like that. So I don't think that this board would have any issues relating certain felonies back to your profession and having a strong justification to deny somebody if that were to occur. Basically, this act just expects us to do that on the front end because if someone does appeal your decision, the burden is on the board to prove why they should be denied instead of the other way around, instead of the applicant proving why they should be approved. So we want to do the legwork up front.
Well, let's add that and maybe just a couple of those examples from other boards on so we can kind of get a feel for what we're looking at, please, on our retreat. Just a few minutes on that, if that's good with everybody, so we can understand. All right.
While I have your attention, if I could quickly give you a rules update. So first I will present our recent progress, the rules on seals, indexes for digital signatures. That was approved by the Attorney General like 2 weeks ago, and last week was filed with the Secretary of State. So pending any opposition from any licensees or from the Government Operations Committee, we're projected for that rule to be effective roughly 90 days from now. And the Government Operations Committee for that rule will likely be in September, so that's when I will go up to the legislature and defend any questions that any members have regarding our rule. That one doesn't seem to be controversial, so we're on a good path with that one. The rule package we had on allowing the term architectural associate and also amending what's acceptable for co-op credit for the progressive engineering experience requirement, that was approved by the Attorney General on August 2nd and sent for filing with the Secretary of State this week. So that one also will likely be effective in roughly 90 days, pending any opposition from licensees and the Government Operations Committee. The third rule package that you have still in the works right now was on the continuing education rules. We just recently got feedback from the governor's office, and they had a few questions regarding the PDHs for the architects. And Tony and I have sent our concerns to Mr. Thompson, and once we all discuss the feedback, we will redraft a few of those rules to make sure the timeline, the issue was with the timeline of when the PDHs were due. We'll send it back to the governor for his approval and then on to the Attorney General for a final signature. So those are still moving, a little bit of a hiccup, but they're still moving forward. And then our last rule package that you had moving was completed and effective on July 24th. That was the package that included eliminating the $15 engineer intern fee. It also added back the Canadian reciprocity and had a few other small cleanup changes. I will say we did run into a little bit of an issue at the Government Operations Committee with our rule on clarifying an offer to practice. This rule was stayed, was removed from the package and stayed, so is not one of the effective rules. And the reason was because of our lack of a definition for engineering and architecture. So I wanted to alert the board about that issue so that could possibly be resolved and discussed at our October meeting. I think the legislature has given us kind of their opinion on what our board should be aiming for. So I think that would be a good topic for our October meeting, especially if we would like to see that rule eventually added. So that's my report on our rulemaking progress.
Ricky?
Liz, do any of those appear in this in the latest
Yes,
rules?
your latest rules that Jared so kindly put together, they include the rule package that was effective on July 24th, so the engineer fee that was eliminated, the Canadian reciprocity, a few other small changes. The seals and the architectural associate and co-op credit rules, those will not be effective until roughly November, and at that point we can give you an updated rules packet to reflect those changes. But since they're not effective yet, we did not want to include them with the current rules that you look at and evaluate with.
Other questions? All right. Thank you very, very much. Director's report.
Thank you. You have on your iPads on page 20, the first piece of our director's report. It is the 2019 meeting dates. I want to kind of have a chance for us to chat about them for just a minute. We've been asked to submit them a little bit earlier than usual, maybe to make sure that we've all got the space. And a couple of different things. Every board has been asked to look at their meeting dates and their number of meetings for two reasons. The first one being financial, if you know, just the expenses of bringing board members and so forth in. And then the second being the ability to have board members be able to be on the board and serve. Sometimes with the programs that have multiple meetings, that is a huge time commitment. So with that, every program was asked to look at and review their dates, make sure that obviously we're in compliance with statute, but if a meeting could be taken out or reviewed for both those purposes, so we can have future appointments be able to jump on board, then we did so. So with that in mind, the dates that you have in front of you no longer have the June meeting. We've staggered the dates a little bit. The reason June was we took into account the heavy periods, mostly for our engineers, and when all those applications come in to make sure you all had time to meet and review them. And then the summer months and able to let you be with your families and so forth. And again, in line with what all the programs are doing. So everything else we've left the Wednesdays and Thursdays pretty much alone. We've shifted May a little bit earlier than what it was because the April's not there, and then the August is shifted a little bit as well. But in talking to Wanda Phillips, and she was a wealth of information for this, because of those big peak periods, we kind of had to move some dates. So I did want everybody to keep that in mind. You're going then to 5 meetings if this is approved, which would be great. I don't remember right now if we had 6 or 7, but that's the goal, to keep you all with less meetings in the summer and still be able to get board business finished, especially with approvals now being online and you all looking at so many of those things. We think, and legal counsel believe, that their complaints will be able to be kept on top so that we're presenting complaints early and we don't miss the 180 days and we have all those responses. The same thing with applications. So these are the dates, and the big one that I did want us to talk about is the December. So we're talking 2019. In December, the 4th and 5th, we are clashing on this big room being available for our Thursday meeting. Room 1B right now, and it could change, is the only one available. I don't know that we fit in 1B. We would be sitting a little bit funny if we had it. Or we could move it to December 11th and 12th, that following week, whichever one the board prefers. On the 11th and 12th, we would have the rooms we're used to. The day that the engineering committee meets would be in 1B, and then in this big one for the 12th. So thoughts, concerns?
I'm okay with 11th and 12th. Any questions, comments?
Ain't think that
okay.
far ahead. So.
Yeah, on the reduction to the number of meetings, just a couple of comments. One is that will reduce the timeliness by which we can respond to people who have complaints filed against them. I know that there is a recording of how quickly things are closed, passed along, decided on. I can't remember the exact language. There's
the 180 days.
It's clock stopping action, and we have 90 days.
Yeah.
So,
180 days.
So,
but legal will have to look ahead. So because we get the complaints, they will know these meeting dates and actually still stay on time.
that's just one of my concerns, is that a complainant would be able to get their issues resolved quickly. Some will get them resolved in 6 months, and some might take 9 months based on the calendar, because we do a lot of discussion, refer back, further investigation, and come back. So that's one of my concerns. Secondly is, if you miss a board meeting, then you're only going to be participating in 4 meetings out of the year as opposed to 5. So I don't travel, so it's not a big deal for me. So I don't necessarily have an opinion per se, but I would hate to not have a discussion over some of the ramifications that might be overlooked on reducing. And I think I saw, you haven't gotten there yet, but we want to reduce the retreat meeting from 3 days to 2 days this year. And it just seems like did I not see that? Oh, I thought you had 2 days. Okay. Forgive me for that.
I have one question. Does this impact the number of absenteeisms that a board member is allowed? Because, was it 2 years ago, they said we could only have 3 meetings out of 6 that we were allowed, and then we were removed from the board. So now if we're going to 5 meetings, does that change the absenteeism?
It doesn't. That would not be affecting the statute. It'd still be the same number of absenteeisms.
Else? Steve?
Well, I'm not sure of all the background on going from 6 meetings to 5, but it seemed to me that a consideration should be, have there been years when we were having meetings with nothing to talk about? And since my time on the board, I don't think that's been the situation. So I guess my suggestion would be to leave it alone. But that's my opinion, because I don't think this board is meeting with nothing to talk about by meeting every other month. So my suggestion is to leave it alone.
Do we have a say in that?
You do, which is the reason we're having the conversation. And again, it's really been brought to every program, so this isn't just A&E. We've had one program that had 4 or 5 meetings, and they're down, I think, to 2 by statute. That's all they need. And business could still be done because their volume of complaints was very small. So it's just the different reasons. But we're being asked, as a whole by the governor's office also, to look at this for appointment of board members and not necessarily this program. So again, it's across the board. But we have several programs where getting appointments is difficult because you're leaving your jobs, you're leaving your profession, you're behind on that. And so sometimes to appoint and fill those positions, that's been a concern. So that's the reason that every program's looking at it, to make it fair so that we can appoint people throughout and they're not leaving homes and all that. So it's that 2-part. And business, yes, is there. Now, we're meeting half a day one day and then half a day the other. But in general, if you're coming in, it's still blocking your calendar for that many times. So.
And Ms. Ballard, to address your concern, in our statute, Tennessee Code Annotated 62.2-202, paragraph B2A, it says, notwithstanding subdivision B1, any member who misses more than 50% of the scheduled meetings in a calendar year shall be removed as a member of the board. So it's not listed as a specific number, but actually a percentage.
Susan?
My thought is, since I've been on this board, this is starting year 7, and I know that's not as much as some of you all, we've always had plenty of work to do. I can't imagine us trying to cram it into 5 meetings when so many times, we're racing to get everything accomplished in the time frame that we have, getting the information from the staff, and I just don't see that works well for us, because I think because we've had such a high rate of stop action on our cases, we're where we need to be, pushing them farther apart, I don't think is going to help the situation. So that's my opinion.
Vicki?
I agree with Steve and Susan. that we just haven't had meetings where we didn't have a lot to go through and hash out. And the other aspect of it is my brain doesn't work so well. The longer I get away, it kind of helps to when you show up every 2 months to get back into all of these issues. And if you missed the May meeting, you'd go 6 months or so without coming to a meeting. You'd be going from February to August, and I'm afraid it would be like you're a brand new board member again. So anyway, I think the 6 has worked well.
Kathy?
I just have a question with regard to, do we have any anecdotal evidence of people specifically for our board who have raised the issue of that's too many meetings for me? I don't want to be on the board because of that. Any anecdotal evidence at all?
No.
Anybody remember that? I'm just curious do we have anybody that knows of people? So maybe for some boards, but we haven't seen it on our board.
And again, it has to do with new appointments was one of the concerns and reasons, and then the expense to bring board members in 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, however many times. If you eliminate one, that's less of the money used to travel to conduct, if business can still be conducted.
I'll go ahead and say that I'm, as the chairman, which I think I can still comment on some stuff I already did, but anyway, I do think that it's not a great policy. I think that to me, as we look at applications being approved, going to computer-based testing where we're going to have applications that have to be approved all through the year, not just on 2 times a year, we still are going to have those applications that I think we have to discuss. I mean, we had, 6, 7 yesterday or something? And some of them are coming more and more difficult to discuss because we're seeing more and more non-traditional degrees, more and more non-traditional paths to people trying to get licensure. And so that's becoming harder to put in a box. And it seems to me that we almost set up our own by, the slower we approve these applications, it becomes some sort of barrier to trade that, we're not letting people have the opportunity to practice their profession for longer periods of time. Like you said, that could be, if somehow something happened, I mean, it could be 6 months that you had an applicant potentially waiting on something that we've been pretty regularly getting them answers to. And so from my perspective, I think, and I understand everybody wants to talk about costs, but, it's not that, it's not that onerous to the benefit that having your applicants approved and having your citizens protected. It's just not that onerous. So I would prefer that we stay with where we are. And I think I'm hearing the board say the same thing. Do we need to go on record to say that, or, okay?
That would need a motion.
Yes, it sounds like it.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we continue to have 6 meetings a year for the A&E board.
Second.
More discussions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the ayes have it.
So what we will do with the dates is fill in the same pattern. So April, June would come back, assuming we have the rooms for them. And December, just because I already know the rooms for the 4th and 5th being 1B only, would we want to move to the 11th and 12th? Is that okay? All right. So December, I think October. So it's a matter of juggling the August and May date. And what I think I will do, if the board is comfortable with that, is go ahead and book the rooms, set the dates similar to what we've had, go back to the 6 dates. We have a motion leaving the 6 meetings a year, so that's perfect. And then email everyone those meeting dates so you can put it on your calendar. And if this motion is okay, then we would be approving the dates based on 2018, and it's just a matter of putting on them. That way, we're not waiting until the October meeting to finalize those dates.
I think that's very legitimate, yeah.
Sounds good.
Ricky?
I'm not sure, I have a problem with if we had to meet in 1B, if this was not available. I mean, we met in a small conference room at Vanderbilt last year in October, and so that's like a palace over there in 1B, so, I mean, unless I'm missing something.
So we said December, we're moving it to the 11th and 12th, so we have our
It
rooms.
looks
Yeah.
like we're in pretty good
Yeah.
shape for that, yes.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
But,
we have,
I hate to interrupt.
Sure.
But we've had a request for a break.
absolutely, absolutely.
So let's take about 10. Right now, it's about, no, I couldn't think of anything to. I've got one or two somewhere.
That's okay.
So, I mean, just, it wasn't like.
Got one or two on something, hang up on the wall. I can hang them. I can do this if I need to. I mean, something like that.
We are good. We're back.
Okay. All right, so we left off under Director's Report with budget, please.
Perfect. That is on page 21 on your iPads, and nothing huge, I don't think, to report. We've got 1 month left of expenses before we close fiscal year. And as it happens, I'm hoping that at the October meeting, we'll be able to kind of see those final numbers, see where we're at with expenses versus revenues. I think a big portion of the cost backs and everything that we get billed back is already in there, so that's the reason that you see the 2 months with more expenses than you do the revenue and us being in the red. But I think overall, the $164,577 that we've got for the year is roughly where we may end up ending up. So hopefully at our next meeting, we'll get the final breakdown of everything and expenses. And my plan for October is also then to kind of do a recap of number of complaints maybe that we've opened and closed, licensing information, and all of that, since that's one of our long meetings.
Any questions from anybody? Now, are we going to have, is at the retreat, will we have a finance committee meeting to go over everything?
We definitely can, if there's information to review. And I've got the list of things, I think in a minute here we'll talk about any other list of items. But at that point, I did want to know which committees are also going to want to break out and meet.
Yeah, I mean, historically, we've met,
Good.
the finance committee meetings met at the retreat to go over everything, so I think that's.
Perfect.
And I don't know, I think there was another time maybe during the year they got together too, but I'm testing my memory on that. All right. Anything else from anybody? Good? All right. We don't have to approve anything?
Not at all. This is information. The next item we do approve each time, these are those administrative complaints. I've now narrowed it to just the current, whatever you haven't seen between meetings is all you'll see. These are 3 cases opened in the month of July, and we just need a motion to go ahead and close those. Those are those administrative cases that we've discussed in the past. The office opens and we close with a letter of warning. And we can actually close them between meetings, but here's your chance to kind of see how many we've opened.
Page 23, Roxana.
Yes, it is, page 23.
Roxanne, where are the the page where we have the statistics on where we've stopped clock stopping and other things? Are they in here?
Walk me through what clock.
Okay, it's a spreadsheet that basically says we've got these 37 complaints. These have been stopped pending an investigation. These have been resolved. These are waiting on whatever. Open, and there are some that are maybe waiting on something. But that's probably, I'll have to go back and find one. There's probably about 30 of them. Is that roughly? I mean, on a page. But it's just, it shows, and at the bottom it says, here's your percentage I mean, it's a
For the
metric.
complaints, our numbers.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a
And-
metric that we're measured on, so it's
Okay,
good to
so
see
I
that.
don't think we've presented it each month, but I wanted to in October present the full, kind of like the licensing numbers again for everyone to review. Give us all the complaints that we've had for the entire fiscal year, how many we've opened, how many we've closed, the percentage that we're measured on. So I want to say on complaints, we're still we're still in the 90 percentile of closing on time. So we can present those at each meeting. I don't think I have, but I definitely can, because that's a statistic we get each quarter. And so at the October meeting, I'll have those complaint numbers and some licensing numbers for you to look at as well.
I think I would prefer that we see where we are relative to, I mean, if it's a metric we're going to be some scrutiny put to, I think we need to look at it every month. Is that board good? Good?
I agree.
Okay.
And that's the metric exactly that I think Sarah described. She's definitely measured on. We are, and we are among the top boards as far as closing them, because everything doesn't go out to investigators. It's kind of in our hands.
Those things that are not visible tend to be forgotten, so I think that would be a helpful thing. All right, thank you.
Absolutely. For these that we close, that are ours that we've opened, we need a motion to make sure we can close them. Yes.
Can you state whether or not these are engineers, architects, landscape, interior designers?
I can't from the complaint numbers, and I don't have in front of me. We can add that information to see what profession they are. That's not a problem. These are mostly those, if we do a renewal and they didn't take it on time and we open a complaint because they, then later showed us the documentation, they're those that we open internally and have determined that they're not really in violation, don't have any other history, those kind of things. But we can add a column here to describe their profession. Okay.
And I think
Ms.
that's what
Fowler?
that report was. Sorry, I think that's what that report shows. I think it shows.
It's by profession.
And who you may have referred to, what's their names, to, if it's a penalty, whatever. It had that information on it.
I was just going to say, our litigation attorney, so Sarah for this board, they do have a printout of what license type the complaint falls under, so I think we can easily add.
I think that's what that spreadsheet also showed, is who, what, and when, kind of. Okay, very good.
Yeah, it's just one pager.
Yeah, it was.
Simple.
Yeah.
Easy to understand.
Yeah. All right. So need a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. All right. Update on grants.
Update on the grants, I will turn it over to Susan to fill you in on this morning's meeting and where we're at.
So the committee met this morning and reviewed the dollar amounts requested versus what they are eligible for. We still have 3 grants that are outstanding that have asked for extensions, and then we'll be able to finalize everything in October. So at this point, we're under budget. So
Any questions for Susan? I assume that is also your grants committee report? Yes. Okay. Well, we'll just strike that off the list then. Any questions? So there's nothing that needs to be approved, just information. All right, thank you. October meeting, topic list.
So we have on your iPads on page 24, the email that I received back. So Robert, this is the 5 points you had. We've added 2 things to those points, the 6th one being, well, maybe, yeah, the 6th one being the Fresh Start Act that has passed, that every program's been discussing and looking at. We want to review and kind of answer more questions, see what else falls in line within the parameters if we were to deny someone for felony. So that'll be one of the additional topics added for our discussions. And I've got also that definitely the Finance Committee will be meeting for those dates. Anything else that's not on here that anyone had?
I sent you a couple of items in an email.
I will pull those, Susan. I didn't add them here, I'm sorry.
It's interior design committee meeting information, so.
Kathy had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to go back and readdress the whole issue, which I kind of forgot about, so I beg the board's forgiveness on this. But if you go to page 8, of the board meeting materials, which is the summary of actions on the complaints that we reviewed last time. At the top of page 8, it talks about the company that had multiple titles, including engineer, in their title. And we discussed this at great length. We discussed the case at great length, and I'd forgotten that it was in the context of a case. So apparently we've moved on. We closed upon a letter of caution, but I kind of remember that we said we were going to do something. And maybe y'all can help me to remember what that was. But we talked about IFMA is an organization that helps with structuring titles for these types of people who take these types of jobs. My concern was that sometimes titles are allowed to kind of slide under the radar, but my concern on this particular case was that these people with these titles seem to explicitly use their title when dealing with the public, apartment occupants, etc., to portend a certain sense of credibility by using the engineer title. And I think it's misleading, and I think it puts the public at risk, because a 20-something-year-old who is renting an apartment and the building engineer comes to see them and says, oh yeah, you don't need to worry about that, when his electrical panel is black around the edges. I'm exaggerating, but that's my concern. So I was wondering if we needed to have more conversation about that, if y'all remember what we said we were going to do. I know it's in the context of this case, but I thought we were going to continue to at least look at it, given the fact that our law is indeed a title law, and these people are using a title, from my perspective, to halo themselves by our expertise and credibility to have the same, even though they actually don't have the same in terms of education, knowledge, experience, etc. So I don't know that I'm making necessarily a recommendation or whatever, but that's the basis for something that I'd like for us to talk about, because I think that it is really in the public's best interest for these people not to be allowed to use that title. Because again, there's no way that you can tell me that they're not using that to their benefit with an unknowing public. So I'll get down off my little soapbox there. Do y'all remember?
Somewhat I do. I think there was a complaint on that, and I think there was an organization that we were going to reach out to see what they allowed for those titles. So I don't know that was resolved on that.
Roxana, do you recall, was there an action on staff's part?
I will check with Sarah, because I think it had to do with the definitions and us making sure that we look at everything in there and maybe within the letter of caution say it. So I know one of our key things in October is to discuss the definitions from everything that Liz also touched on for the rulemaking packets to so forth. So I'll check to see what the letter looked like to make sure that it covered, more instruction, if you will. But
is it possible to get a copy of that redacted letter at the next meeting?
Yes.
I'd love to see that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Getting back to the
topic list, right? Or this one we're on topics list. I thought we were on topics list for
Yes.
that. Yes, okay.
That's correct. I'd also like to add a landscape architecture committee meeting, please.
Yes, Kathy.
I'd also be curious as to whether or not we could bring in, for our own edification, a vendor who specializes in the BIM modeling software for the purposes of explaining to us how they see that side of the industry unfolding. I think we have pockets of knowledge, but honestly, it's beyond me at this point, and I feel like it's going to come before us in a big way if we don't act proactively on this. And so I'm just wondering if maybe staff could make arrangements for somebody that, or two, we don't want to show preference, but I know there's specific vendors that's what they do, is they offer that software package, and I think we need to know more. It's kind of like electronic seals back in the old days.
Frank?
Yes, there's been some comments, I guess, about wanting a committee meeting to be on the agenda in the October retreat. My experience in the past, and everybody else here, I'm sure, is that all committees are scheduled a meeting time at the retreat. So rather than us say, hey, we want the architectural committee, I think all committees need to be meeting.
Kind of hopefully a list of the items and topics that we want to discuss.
to
I
be
don't
on
want
the
to
agenda
miss
for each
anything
one.
that you all want to cover, right? But on the software, Kathy, anything in particular, any guidance you can give us on?
Y'all know who those people are? Does anybody know who those vendors are that could? I see hands waving in the back. Can y'all fill us in?
With them. We had a really good presenter at our conference this year, specifically on the topic of BIM. So there's one or two vendors that the architects and I guess the engineers and work with Casey to give you some names that you can reach out to.
Can you tell us what, I mean, specifically, I'm curious about the whole securing the model so that it can't be modified without persons who are in responsible charge being noted.
Right. The two companies that the associations that have reached out to AIA Tennessee, one is Graphisoft. They're really, I mean, they're one of the vendors that speak to the architects, as well as Applied Technology. And Applied Technology is the one that presented at our conference this year. And so they will be able, I cannot speak directly to that technology and that software and the modeling, but they are very knowledgeable and can speak with it. The lady that spoke this year, she was an architect. She's a licensed architect, so she speaks your language.
She speaks our language.
Does
what about us, though? What about
Are you going to ask on that?
I just had another.
Let me jump in on some of that real quick, and I think that's a good topic. Here's my fear is we're going to discuss that and not have any idea about what we're really discussing from this board. And the reason I say that is there are larger forces at play here when it comes to these BIM models, these 3D models, and all the stuff that we do between architects and engineers. There's a technology task force with NCAAS that I think has come out with some position stuff on it and working on some of that. I think within ACEC National, I think there's some stuff. I mean, what I would like to see is if we're going to do something, I'm not necessarily sure that the retreat is the right thing. Maybe we just need to have a 10-minute, here's what's going on. But, I mean, they're talking about doing blockchain stuff and things that I have no idea about on how to secure stuff. There's an insurance component to all of this on who can do responsible stuff that I'm not sure we can get all the players together to get all. I would just encourage the architects and engineers from a society level, and I'm not trying to kind of spearhead something because it gets to be pretty big pretty quick. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that I don't think it's a terrible time for the board to at least be on the record with areas of concern, not necessarily concern is probably not the right word, but areas of interest, because we are working fairly diligently right now with the state on new BIM standards. And if the board from the licensure perspective and registered perspective has opinions on specifics, particularly what you mentioned, Kathy, and those making sure that those things are built into those standards, this is the time to do that because we're at the table on those right now, if that helps.
Yeah, and I just want us to be, I don't think ahead of the curve per se. I just don't want us to fall any farther behind on the curve in terms of just general knowledge. And I was going to follow that up with, I think it would be also equally valuable, sorry, Ricky, I know you think, to have something similar from the land surveying side, because there is so much between unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, geomatics. There's so much stuff out there that is crossing into our playing field, that we're going to have to be listening to cases going forward. I just think if the board as a whole can start to hear some of these technology discussions together, and when we sit around, I always learn when I come to these things because y'all bring up so many great topics I haven't thought about. And so that was kind of my reason, is to embrace these technologies before we have Sarah present a case. That's my whole point. So not to try to solve anything and not to come up with a position paper or even an opinion, but just to be more knowledgeable as a group. So I'll shut up now.
Go ahead, Ricky, and I'll say it. Quick thing.
I think we mentioned before when we were talking about anonymous complaints, that issue, that we wanted to discuss that in October. So I thought that'd be good on the list.
Oh, yes. You're right. Thank you.
Only thing I wanted to do was just kind of coincide what you said, that there is such a larger discussion right now with the standards. I hate to kind of get too far ahead with that. There's like a big with the state architect, and there's a lot going on right now. Although I think our input will be good, I think it's I'm not going to say premature, but I just think we better make sure that we stay high up with it. So that was all. It was really more confirming with you. AIA is also involved with that.
And let me say something too. I know we've got at NCAAS next week. There's a UAV session that's there. I think it would be a good thing for us as board members to try to. These discussions are being held at annual meetings. These discussions are being held at other things that sometimes we get to attend, sometimes we don't. But if there's some way to get some YouTube videos or some things about those discussions so that we can all on our own can go help educate ourselves. And I'm not saying we don't need to have at some point, but I just think when you talk about UAVs, I mean, we do that, we do LiDAR, we do all these other things, but the topics get to be so huge that I think if you don't compartmentalize them somewhat and have the real experts talking about them, I don't want a vendor to come in here and tell us. I want people that are practitioners that are using it, and I'm afraid we get vendors in here, they're going to tell us what they want us to hear. They may be experts, I don't know, but I mean, we can certainly have it as something to maybe have what we need to go do our homework on later, but I don't know how educational it is going to ultimately be for the whole. Find some resources to educate ourselves on that. That's my perspective. And I'll go on, I'll say this again for anybody that wants to listen. A lot of these topics are talked about at national meetings, topics that are cutting edge stuff that do impact our board, and the more knowledge that we can get and involved in those discussions, the better decisions that we can make. And if we're left on an island, a lot of times we don't get to the benefit of that wisdom around the thing. So that's just a comment. All right. Anything else for the October meeting topics? All right. Thank you all. Region 3. If says anything, it didn't happen. Anybody remember what happened?
I'm not sure what that is a reference to, October of 18.
I think that's a training conference for member board administrators.
Oh, that's correct.
I believe.
I just couldn't remember. I knew there was something going on.
Is this something that the board needs to discuss to decide if somebody is attending, that we want to attend? Obviously, today, if we did have a motion that someone's attending, we would ask for, approval for that to attend, and then we'd have to follow up. I don't know that would be the case, that we'd be approved, but this is their Region 3 meeting.
Well, I believe, and Liz, you can comment on this, I think this is for executive directors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So...
yeah, they talked about it a bit at the NCARB national meeting that we went to in Detroit. It sounded like it was geared towards training our directors of our boards.
Right, and updates and all that. Yeah, it's not just for It's for all
It
the
was
directors.
updates on the profession and updates on regulating the profession.
That's right, that's right.
I guess, Roxana, they're talking about you.
Talking about you.
Talking about me, good. Okay. So I can look at the date, make sure if the board is comfortable with me going, and it
I
fits
think it'd
in,
be
then
good.
absolutely, I will try. And I'm trying to, our meeting
I
is
believe that
before
it might be funded by NCARB.
I
We would have
believe
to
so.
double check,
I believe
but
so.
I don't think there would be an expense for the state for that.
Do
The
we
board would
need,
still need to vote, but
I'm sorry, I'm not, do we need to make any kind of a motion that we would,
I think
so
you
you can
do,
move forward, or is that something you can do executively?
No, I think we do want a motion to say that, I would be attending, funded by the state or the licensees through the funding is still,
Yeah.
we would have to approve. So, and then I'll look at, I know it doesn't clash with our meeting, but I'm not sure what else. So then we'll take a look if I can't attend, if Glenn can attend, as long as we're able to go.
just
That
as
we
a
definitely would.
disclaimer, I am getting married that weekend, so I will not be able to attend.
Oh, come on.
Sorry to let you guys down.
Yeah, where is it? Where is the meeting?
Unfortunately, I've spent a lot of money on deposits already, so cannot rearrange that.
We'll give you a kitchen pass this time, so. And back to the funding, it may even be Region 3 that funds this. So, because it's the Region 3 directors too. So, whatever. So,
Well, wait a minute, I'm kind of reading ahead here. There's an NCARB MBE/MBC conference, October 12th and 13th. The Region 3 MBE training is October the 14th.
They've extended one day for the executive
For
directors
Region 3.
and for that training, right. But I think it is 3 days, if I remember reading different things.
Member board chair, this is that every 2 years there's an MBE and member board chair have a meeting that happens every 2 years, and that's what this is. But there's both. And the MBE training is the next day after that.
On a
So-
Sunday, yeah.
So that would be, that would be me and you, or you and me, excuse me.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
There you go, it's a song.
You know how it is. So,
And her an additional day.
yeah, and you would have an additional day.
Right, on the Sunday.
If it's in, out in California, we may want to wait till the fires have, no. I guess we need a motion then to,
This is in St. Louis.
St. Louis, to authorize that, how do we word that?
We'd have to make a motion that the board is agreeing for Mr. Thompson and I to go, and then we will start the paperwork to see if we are approved to travel. And we'll start on that today, just as soon as I can let you know, so we don't book anything in advance of.
Chairman, I'd like to make that motion.
Second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Before we go to engineering committee meeting, it wasn't necessarily on here, but we're talking about travel. I've got a presentation tomorrow to TDOT's GTAs. I forget what that stands for. It's at TDOT Region 1. It's not asking for any reimbursement or anything. It's 10 minutes from my office, but just get the board's approval for me to go. It's basically what the board does, along with some other things like responsible charge, engineer of record, and some other topics that they've asked me to discuss with a lot of their new hires. These people have been hired a year or two or less, just out of school. So I would like the permission from the board to go do that.
I'd make a motion to give Mr. Campbell permission to attend that meeting, conference, whatever it may be, meeting.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion?
Just one comment. Will you talk to him a little bit about progressive experience and putting information on?
Oh, that's on there.
Thank you.
I've got a whole slide about it's your license and you need to take ownership and responsibility of getting there. So There may be a couple of them crying when they leave, but that's fine. Question?
Sorry, no, yeah, let's take the vote.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Blair?
If I may add one additional item to this, since we're talking about dates. The CLARB meeting that the landscape architect normally attends is coming up next month, and unfortunately it's located in Toronto, and the state of Tennessee has denied my travel to Toronto for paying for the event. So just want.
While we're talking about board speaking engagements, as you remember earlier from our professional society reports, we did have a request for a few members to join a panel at the Tennessee Engineering Conference. So if the board wants to volunteer some members and also vote to allow them to speak at that panel, we can go ahead and do that while we're just not ready to volunteer people. We could bring it up. Voluntold.
Well, I'm already signed up there. I'll be there. So I mean, I if that's a volunteer or whatever, but I mean that I'll already be there for that meeting.
Some kind of motion that it's approved for us to attend.
Right. Well, mostly if you are speaking on behalf of the board, that's where the board will. give you
Casey, how's
permission
that
to
set
speak.
up? Are you going to have a panel, or what's the plan?
So I was asked to speak on a panel to sort of give an update on QBS and other issues, and he said, and I think I'll probably ask some board members as well, because we speak differently on some of those things publicly, and so I think that I think it would probably, my guess is that an update, we've done sort of almost town hall like in the past, where people can ask questions of you, but I think it will be geared mostly to what y'all are working on, or I would guess there would be some questions about the seal that you've been working on, and I think it's we can do it a couple of different ways. We can have a specific session and then really do a town hall if you want to, but really y'all aren't going to meet again before that conference, and so to make sure that somebody's allowed to speak on behalf of the board on specific issues would be helpful.
If it's about QBS, Robert, you're on the committee, right? So he probably should be that. If you want me to do something that is more town hallish, I did that last year, and I'm happy to do that again.
I think it's going to be several topics. I don't think that's going to be the only one. Would be my guess. Got 2 volunteers. We need approval.
Make a motion that we approve the travel for this event.
I'll second that.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? None. All right. Any other travel? Yes, ma'am. Susan.
Okay. The National CIDQ meeting will be in Nashville in November, and we get to be the host this year. So I need approval for me to come back here in November for that meeting. So it's the one I always go to, but usually it's somewhere else. So, and I'm a delegate, and then one other person will be a delegate, which would typically be Roxanne or one of the architectural members. So.
Any motions, questions, discussion?
I move to approve the request.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So that gets our travel arrangements out of the way. Okay, good deal. I suppose I could put under new business, but
I had a quick note on the October. So once we finalize our agenda for October, and it'll be sooner rather than later because it's such a big meeting, I want to make sure to send it to everyone. But that Wednesday, the work group committee regarding the QBS is meeting that Wednesday. So we'll still have our full day Thursday. Friday with business will likely be a longer day than what we do now. It'll all still fit into the 3 days. I just wanted everyone to know that the group couldn't come in and do the tail end of Friday to meet for the QBS work group. They're going to do a portion of Wednesday. And so we'll fit all that in.
We're going to need to start committee meetings Wednesday morning at 8
Wednesday
o'clock.
morning, all day Thursday, and Friday maybe, depending on what board business, a full day. Yes.
Real quick, too, what October, just so I know, are we the 4th and 5th or 11th and 12th?
4th and 5th, it's the beginning
4th and 5th?
of the month,
Okay.
yes.
Just making sure.
And Friday, so it's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Let me open my calendar to October.
Yeah, I played a lot of that. Before I said it.
3rd, 4th, and 5th.
All right. Engineer Committee report, please.
We reviewed several applications, and most of those had to do with assessing and verifying progressive experience or education. We then talked about the upcoming NCEES annual meeting that's next week that several of us are going to, and we reviewed the motions that will be made, and in doing that, these are motions for changes to the NCEES model law and model rules, which doesn't necessarily affect us, but it is useful for us, and it can affect us, I guess, if that becomes kind of a national standard type of thing. So we need to keep in touch with whether we're out of touch with the model law and model rules. Anyway, a couple of topics that came up that are coming up for motions. One is confidentiality of references, and so that is an interesting topic that we need to I think discuss for ourselves. Also, the model law and rules are cleaning up some language in terms of sealing the description of what we need to seal in terms of drawings, reports, maybe BIM files, et cetera, the long list. They're adding a definition of what document means, and then they can use the word document throughout, and it kind of cleans up where seals are needed. So that's interesting. And then there's also a motion to lower the price of the FE exam, and we have been, as a board, supportive of that in the past. So that's a good motion. We also talked with Roxana and really coordinated how Roxana deals with model law applicants for comedy and reapplication, and how we deal with those model law applicants when there's no past supervisor as a reference, which we encourage. And so we talked about when Roxana can approve that and when it needs to come to a board member or board member. And lastly, we talked about this issue of anonymous complaints and some real world situations where that's taking place. End of report.
All right, any questions for Ricky? All right, thank you very much. Architect Committee report, please.
Yes, we met this morning, and we had one application, interesting application, and it was a gentleman who has been in practice for 39 years, and he had requested that we give him consideration to waive the 3 references by architects, because the people that he had previously worked for were either out of business, couldn't find them, possibly deceased. And so we were given that consideration on a case-by-case basis today to see if we could waive that. Well, we come to find out that we can't do that unless we amend the rule. Interesting point in regard to that is that architects and engineers cannot do that, but the landscape architects can. Am I correct, or
No, I'm sorry. So let me read the rule for you first, and then I'll explain what I think was the issue. So we are talking about Rule 0120-01-.09 references. Paragraph 2 says, 3 such references must be registered architects or engineers with registration and experience in the applicant's field of experience, except, however, the applicants for registration as a landscape architect may use references who are registered engineers, architects, or landscape architects. So if you're an architect, if you're applying to be an architect in Tennessee, you have to have 3 architect references. If you're applying to be an engineer in Tennessee, you have to have 3 engineer references. But it's a little different for landscape architects. It says that they can use references from an engineer, architect, or landscape architect. So there's not an exemption for them to not have those 3. They can just choose from the other fields, whereas the architects and engineers cannot. I think the confusion, though, from this applicant, these 3 references don't necessarily have to be a previous employer. They could be 3 colleagues that are architects. So I think in this case, with his wide range of experience, if we communicate maybe a little bit more, it doesn't appear that he should have trouble getting 3 references from 3 architects. If this becomes an issue that we're seeing a lot with applications, then we can certainly look at amending the rule. But we do have several rule packages moving through right now, so we'd also have to consider the timing for that as well.
Thank you. You explained that much better than I could. But it was curious to me that the landscape architects could do that and we couldn't. I don't know the history behind that, and that's why I wanted to bring that up. You're right. We are going to advise him that he needs to provide 3. But 3 references from someone in the profession, and as I stated this morning, they might be very sterilized and clinical kind of thing. Yes, I know him; he does okay work or whatever it is, but he's going to meet the letter of the law, if you will. So, but that was just an interesting conversation because I don't think we've ever seen one. I've never seen one like that. I've seen them that got bad reviews, but that's different. They got the reviews. So anyway, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any new business, Frank?
I'd like to bring up that, I don't know if everybody's aware, but the NCARB has asked that the architects, I guess, on the board and the board staff come up with some historical information regarding the board and NCARB. And that's being generated because next year is the 100th anniversary of the NCARB. And if you didn't know it, the NCARB was started in Nashville, Tennessee, 100 years ago, or 100 years ago next year. And so in March 2019, there will be what NCARB calls a regional meeting, which at one time the regions met separately in different places, but now it's all collectively. So it's basically all the NCARB board members and the staff and so forth will have this regional meeting in Nashville. And from what I ran into a girl at the last meeting I was at that's on their, I'm going to call it a venue committee. And I asked her when they were going to start looking in Nashville for, places, a lot of things. And she indicated to me it would be in August. Well, this is August. So there's a lot of planning going on. When we go to these regional meetings, there's usually some participation from the local board and probably from the local AIA. I know they're always there. And any other architectural related groups. Heck, they may want the governor to make a speech. I don't know. But and usually there's some kind of y'all can speak to it too, but usually there's some kind of, and I know Nashville has films about Nashville, but some kind of video, usually at the opening, and showing what a fun time being in Nashville is and that type of thing. Anyway, I think that would be a good thing, for lack of, I can't think of the right word, but I think it's good for Nashville, and I think it would be good for the architectural profession for this to be happening here, and we ought to take advantage of that.
I will definitely reach out to the individuals so far that I've dealt with in NCARB and find the committee venue representative so we can start talking about that. Yeah.
One more comment, that they were thrilled about the Parthenon. They would love to see a real Parthenon that's not in ruins, and we
Yeah.
and we do have functions there. AIA has a legislative reception. I'm not sure it'll be big enough for the icebreaker, but that was several people said they couldn't wait to see it and wanted to know, gosh, could we have a reception there? So anyway, just throwing ideas out. So thank you.
All right. Anything? One last thing I would, and I don't know for the other board members, what we have on our iPads, I would prefer that, can you just send us that information as well? I mean, there's actually a letter in here from an architect and I didn't know anything about this.
So this is one of the items that I have on our topics to make sure that we add. This is, he's just sent a letter the last week, and it's a very well-written letter. It's for consideration of continuing education after a certain amount of years or age, trying to see if he could be grandfathered in or exempted from having to take it, and something to consider. So we will have that as something to discuss as well.
I think if we can just get what's on the iPad a few days before the meeting, it helps me to be able to kind of flip through here and go, oh, we're going to, there's when the income, whatever the situation is, if there's something to note, this Fresh Start Act that was on there, I mean, I think we had an email about it some time ago, but it would have been nice to know we're going to be just talking about this a little bit, so if we do have some questions, we can kind of do that. Not have to do them on the spur of the moment as we're reading it, and try to be as prepared and take as much advantage of the time as we have to get everything together. So if you can, just send whatever you're going to have on here that we're going to go over, just fire it off to us in a PDF. And Wanda, I don't know how much coordination, I'm looking at Wanda because...
Well, let me add to what Wanda's. So these items are actually finalized the Monday, Tuesday before you all get here. I mean, we work on them until the end. The agenda, because it's bullet point items, we can put together so that it's on the website with proper notice to the public mostly, and so you all have them. The legal report is what we work on ahead of time as much as possible, and anything, the minutes to finish to get to. So those I will always want to get to you at least a week in advance, and that's what we've been sticking with. This we may not have until easily Tuesday.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but even Tuesday's better because, Tuesday afternoon we can kind of skim through here and go, oh, I need to, and there's usually only 2 or 3 things. I mean, I'm looking at the other board members that we might want to say, hey, wait a minute, we need to think about this, or I need to investigate this a little further, or make ourselves a note or something, so that we just, sometimes things pop up and you forget what you were going to say, and it's good to have those, even if it's just for a couple hours to sit down and review. So I don't know if that's helpful to other board members. It's helpful to me to go through and see everything before we talk about it. Even if it's just a few minutes, it helps clear the thought process easier.
Only thing that would be taken out is anything redacted if it's
That's
got a
perfect.
licensing. But if it didn't need to be redacted, we have no problem because by Tuesday evening we've got it together.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. All right, anything else? Oh, sorry, Ricky's head was in the way. Go ahead, Kathy.
One other thing that I'd love for you to put back into the report, Roxana, is the numbers of registrants by discipline. We used to get that every meeting, and it would show architects, engineers, interior designers, everybody across the top, total for the past quarter, new for this quarter, total numbers. It's just a good number to have, because, believe it or not, people ask that kind of question. How many registrants do you represent?
So we talked about that early on, and because I think it was at all your meetings, and just given the fact that we are stretched completely differently now, I think at that point the board was comfortable with me presenting it a couple of times a year instead of at every meeting. And so October is when I was going to add back the complaints and all the registrants' information, with the possibility maybe of taking the oldest year, because we presented it, I think, June or April? April. I gave you those numbers. And so June and August I did, and October is going to have the full year. And then, but if you all want to see it at every meeting?
See it every meeting.
Okay.
I hate to make such work for you.
No,
but
that's okay. I mean, we addressed it, and that was kind of the goal, to see if you really needed it at every
I've
meeting.
missed it since we hadn't had it, so I apologize. But
No, it's okay.
it has
It's
been-
I don't think I was here when that happened, because
It's April, yeah.
2 issues last year. I have to report back to the associations where we are, so not having that information, makes it difficult to know how to gauge. We actually increased 20 members as of June, which was huge for us because we've been on a decline for a while. So that gave a lot of encouragement. So it's positive from our perspective. So.
Thing is, we have nothing else to go crazy about.
Are we
right?
going to discuss Mr. Williams' letter?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's a letter, it's written, but I don't know what action it needs to be taken by us. I mean, it's just, again, it's a letter. I'm sorry that he feels that way, but I think it's something that this board didn't necessarily create. I think it's just the other things that are going on. All right. Well, sorry that I don't think I've got the record. Still have my own record, but we will try to move through these things a little quicker as I get, back in a rhythm a little bit. And Grant, I'm still afraid that we're ostracizing you with a different color name tag. I don't think that means that we're trying to single you out, but maybe it is. I don't know.
I'm just glad to be here.
You may be
No
like the new
worries.
Supreme Court justice. You get to go man the cafeteria or something.
Can't
I don't
wait.
know. All right. Seeing no other business, I will make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. I did probably technically have to do that, but I felt like it. All right. Thank you.
Is that yours?
It'll be fun.
It will.
You drive safe.
Safe, Steve.